Chapter 44-45. A pitiful person must have a detestable side. Ignorance was also a sin. Hua Jin's heart gradually sank into despair. He thought that Alice and Natalia should have been rescued. What he was about to face was probably death. At this moment, he suddenly envied those believers. After drinking the strawberry juice that contained hydrogen chloride, they died without much pain. What he was about to face was a raging fire. In the square, some people obediently drank the strawberry juice, while others resisted. However, in the end, those who resisted were shot to death, strangled to death, or injected with cyanide. Jim sat on the throne, trembling as he took out a pistol from the hidden lining of his suit and calmly loaded it. However, when he pressed the muzzle to his temple, his emotions suddenly became agitated. I will be immortal for all eternity. Everyone must follow me. He suddenly shouted, Mother! Mother! Burn the Holy Sun! Burn the Holy Sun! The screams became fiercer and fiercer. Hua Jin looked at the people holding torches getting closer and closer. His whole body trembled as he closed his eyes. However, in the next second, the roar of a car came from the end of the square. Immediately after, when the believer raised his hand and was about to throw the torch to the firewood at Hua Jin's feet, two thunderous gunshots echoed. One gunshot was Jim's suicide by swallowing a bullet. The other shot was fired from the end of the square. The bullet accurately pierced the believer's wrist. The torch fell to the ground and ignited the oil barrel at his feet. The fire immediately spread. The believer's body was instantly on fire. He screamed and panicked as he rushed to the crowd in the square. Ah, go away. This is the fire of sin. Go away. The square instantly went out of control. Hua Jin looked at this scene in a daze. He looked in the direction of the gunshots and saw an off-road vehicle breaking through the encirclement of the believers and speeding toward him. A soldier mounted a light machine gun on the sunroof of the car and fired at the armed forces that were swarming toward them. The car stopped below the stage. Gong Jia pushed open the car door and got out. With a single stride, he effortlessly stepped onto the stage and walked toward Hua Jin. At this moment, Hua Jin was already shocked speechless. Gong Jia. How are you? When Gong Jia saw the whip wounds all over his body, his eyes were burning with anger. Damn it! What did these people do to him? Did they use private punishment? What are you doing here? It's too dangerous here. If I didn't come, you would have died. But what? Shut up. Gong Jia had a murderous look on his face. His murderous aura was so strong that Hua Jin didn't dare to speak for a while. Gong Jia had just untied the ropes around his arms when Hua Jin caught sight of a believer walking toward Jim from the corner of his eye. At this moment, Jim had already fallen on his cult leader's throne and shot himself. Only his cold body was left. The believer took the gun from Jim's hand and reloaded it. Then, he aimed it in the direction of Hua Jin and Gong Jia. Beneath their feet was firewood soaked in gasoline. Once the bullet hit the firewood, it would explode violently. Danger! The moment the believer opened fire, Hua Jin suddenly pushed Gong Jia to the side. Chapter 44-46. Gong Jia climbed up nimbly, grabbed Hua Jin's collar, and jumped off the stage. Hua Jin's skills were not as good as his. He stumbled all the way until he was thrown into the car. Gong Jia also got into the car. The machine gunner, who was standing at the sunroof, swiftly loaded his gun. Amidst the hail of bullets, he was shot in the shoulder. Young Master Jia, I've been shot. We have to get out of here as soon as possible. Gong Jia stepped on the accelerator, and the car suddenly sped forward. The believers who had surrounded them were scared into retreating. The light machine gun had a total of 100 bullets, and it had been firing all the way. At this time, there was no way to control whether the bullets were aimed at the armed forces or civilians. At this time, anyone who pounced on the car was identified as a militant by the machine gunner and shot dead one by one. It was especially at this time that they could not compromise with so-called kindness. In a moment's time, they could be the ones to die here. Gong Jie drove the car, charging straight ahead. He tried his best to find an empty road with no one around. However, someone shouted from outside the car, and those crazy believers persevered and pounced on the car. It was obvious that they wanted to use their bodies of flesh and blood to block their way. Hua Jin shrank into the corner of the car. There were many militants outside the car, and they were all armed. He could not help Gong Jie much, and he could only try his best to protect himself and avoid unnecessary harm. During this time, Hua Jin vaguely felt that the car had run over something. A corpse? Or a living person who had been rolled under the wheels? He covered his face in shock, not daring to think too much. The machine gunner was still defending his last position. All of a sudden, Hua Jin felt a warm liquid splashing on his face. He looked up and saw that one of the machine gunner's arms had been injured by a bullet. Blood was gushing out endlessly. "You're injured." However, the machine gunner could not hear him. He had followed Gong Jie to rescue Hua Jin. He already knew that following Gong Jie this time would not bode well for him. On the way here, one of his brothers had died in the smoke. He had never thought of leaving alive. He only wanted to use his body of flesh and blood and his astonishing willpower to escort Gong Jie and Hua Jin out of this place. This was his mission. The car left the square without a hitch, and soon left the believers far behind. However, Gong Jie still did not dare to let down his guard. "Leo, how are you?" He looked straight ahead, held the steering wheel, and asked the machine gunner. However, there was no response for a long time. Hua Jin carefully patted the machine gunner's waist, but there was no movement for a long time. An ominous premonition arose in his heart. "Is it important? Are you okay?" He carefully carried Leo back to his seat. Only then did he realize that Leo's throat had been injured by a bullet and was badly mutilated. Blood gushed out, but he still maintained the posture of hugging the machine gun. His eyes were opened in a daze, and his whole body was trembling. With his throat injured, he could no longer speak. Even if the environment was not so harsh, Hua Jin knew that the machine gunner named Leo was probably dead. "What should we do?" "Gong Jie, he's seriously injured." Gong Jie held the steering wheel tightly. His bloodshot eyes looked at Leo through the rearview mirror. Chapter 44-47. Bang! A loud sound was heard. Gong Jie fired. In an instant, the bullet hit the oil stain on the bottom of the car. In an instant, flames spread all the way and surrounded the oil cylinder. The car exploded and flipped over. "Let's go. We can't stay here for long. If the explosion alarms the nearby army, it won't be good if they rush over." Hua Jin said, "How do we go?" "Where are we going?" "To the port. Most of the troops are waiting there. But first, let's find a place and let them send troops to pick us up." "Okay." Hua Jin followed Gong Jie. He knew in his heart that most of East Africa had fallen into the smoke of war. Originally, it was only a small-scale battle. However, it had evolved to a larger and larger scale. The car rampaged all the way. Along the way, Hua Jin watched the car pass through the rain of bullets. It was hard to imagine that if they were a step later, they would be completely surrounded by the armed forces. At that time, the consequences would be unimaginable. What he didn't expect the most was, originally, he had completely given up in his heart. However, he didn't expect that Gong Jie would take such a big risk to rush over to rescue him. Was he not afraid of death? Knowing that the whole of East Africa was covered in the flames of war, he dared to drive a jeep into the divine temple. This time, thank you, Hua Jin still had lingering fear. He didn't hide his gratitude at all. Gong Jie turned around and glanced at him. "What are you thanking me for?" "Thank you for rushing over to save me." "Humph." Gong Jie became arrogant. "Do you think I rushed over here to save you?" "What else? If it wasn't for sister repeatedly asking me to take care of you, I wouldn't have bothered." The grateful smile on Hua Jin's face gradually disappeared. This Gong Jie. He even said that he was touched. He was touched for a long time. He didn't expect that it was because of this reason. Besides, what are you thanking me for? If it wasn't for the grudge between Hurricane and the Divine Temple, you wouldn't have been implicated. Grudge? How could the Divine Temple have a grudge with Hurricane? Hua Jin took a few steps forward. What's going on? Surprisingly, Gong Jia was patient enough to tell him everything in detail. The Sacred Palace sect is at their wits' end. Originally, he had fled to East Africa to find a paradise that was conducive to the development of the church. He did not expect that a war would break out. Without enough food and armaments, they were like trapped beasts in East Africa. That's why he's doing everything he can to kidnap Hurricane as a hostage. He wants to use this hostage to threaten Hurricane. Hua Jin muttered to himself, why does Hurricane make enemies wherever he goes? Gong Jia turned around. What did you say? No, nothing. In that case, he was the one who was implicated. The thought of Professor Romanka's tragic death made him even more fearful. Do people really have a destiny? Among the four of them, only Professor Romanka did not escape the disaster. Romanka is dead. He was beheaded by those disciples. I know. Do you know? Yes, the Divine Temple sect sent a beheading video a few days ago to provoke Hurricane. Hua Jin didn't know that the game between Hurricane and the Divine Temple sect was so dangerous. Chapter 44-48. We are about 40 kilometers away from the port. If we walk, we might not be able to get there in one night. We have to get back to the port before dawn tomorrow. If his men did not come to their rescue in time, then they might be trapped in such a chaotic place. What worried him even more was that there seemed to be no news from Vermilion Bird. In the last call, he seemed to have heard the sound of an explosion. Gong Jia suspected that Jim had replaced Hua Jin with another suicide bomber, pretending to be a hostage. In fact, he had enough explosives tied to his body. He did not know how Vermilion Bird, Natalia, and Alice were doing. He had already dispatched dozens of mercenaries to search for them according to the location of the last call. So far, there was no feedback. However, Gong Jia was not worried about Vermilion Bird and the others. His most important goal now was to get Hua Jin out of here safely. However, these 40 kilometers on foot was nothing for him. Normally, 40 kilometers was just one of his training subjects. But for Hua Jin, although 40 kilometers was really long, under the control of the desire to survive, it could always stimulate his infinite potential. In order to survive, 40 kilometers was nothing at all. The scary thing was that he did not know what he would encounter on this 40 kilometers road. Put this on. Gong Jia handed him a bulletproof vest. Hua Jin took it, but did not expect the bulletproof vest to be far heavier than he imagined. Why is it so heavy? Because it is a bulletproof vest. Is it? Hua Jin said, I have seen bulletproof vests before, but they are not this heavy. Hua Jin put on the bulletproof vest and muttered, this is like making me walk 40 kilometers with this weight. It's killing me. Of course, a normal bulletproof vest is not this heavy. Why? Because, Gong Jia walked in front of him, stretched out his hand, pulled out a straw from the vest, and opened the valve. There is a filtration device in here, and there is some water in it. If they ran out of water, as long as there was a water source, they could replenish themselves. When the water was pumped inside, it would go through a circulation device and be converted into a standard that could be consumed by the human body. In addition, this is a special grade bulletproof vest. Apart from heavy sniper bullets, it can withstand bullets of many types and ranges. As he spoke, he put the bulletproof helmet on the man's head again. Hua Jin felt that this helmet was many times heavier than the heavy headwear on set. I feel like my whole body is heavy. He happened to be thirsty. Hua Jin took out a straw and greedily drank a few mouthfuls. Although it was filtered, the filtered water still had an inexplicable fishy smell. He frowned. Although it tasted bad, he still drank a few mouthfuls. He was too thirsty. It had been a few days since he drank such a refreshing mouthful of water. His lips were already extremely dry and cracked. Gong Jia looked at him and felt an inexplicable heartache. Oh. I think I drank so much, and there's not much left in there. There's no rush. I still have some in my clothes. Is this water enough for us to walk more than 40 kilometers? I don't know if there is any river in front. If there is, it won't be a problem to replenish it. The important thing is. Gulp. Chapter 44-49. Before he could finish his sentence, Gong Jia heard a wailing sound coming from Hua Jin's stomach. He looked at Hua Jin, and the latter suddenly became embarrassed. Hungry? Yes. You haven't eaten well these few days, right? Yes. Here. Gong Jia took out a bag of dry food from his backpack. Hua Jin took it, but he was a little hesitant. What about you? Do you still have dry food? No more. This is compressed dry food. It should be able to replenish as much energy as possible. Then if I eat it, what about you? Gong Jia played it down. We'll take it one step at a time. I can hold on for a while, but if you can't hold on, I'll carry you and both of us will be finished. As he said that, he added, let's see if we can hunt some living creatures at night. Living creatures? Yes, for example, wild rabbits and wild deer. Roast them. Oh, you know how to hunt? Yes, this is the basic survival skill of the wild. Hua Jin followed Gong Jia's footsteps. He quietly ate the dry food, but his heart felt warm. Although Gong Jia didn't seem to be a very meticulous person, the more dangerous the situation was, the more his concern was the greatest encouragement and comfort to Hua Jin. At the same time, there was an indescribable sense of security. Although he was in a predicament, with his brother around, he had a feeling that no matter how great the danger was, it was nothing compared to his brother's presence. At night, Gong Jia found a mountain with a natural cave. The weather at night gradually turned cold. The wind was strong, and the cave was very warm. Hua Jin carried some firewood. Gong Jia used the flint that he carried with him to light the firewood and started a fire. Stay here and warm yourself. Don't walk around. I'll be back soon. Where are you going? Gong Jia said, to find something to eat. After saying that, he left the cave. Hua Jin obediently guarded the fire. Wrapped in his military coat, he gradually fell asleep. She woke up in a daze, but to her surprise, Gong Jia had already returned. At the same time, he smelled blood. Hua Jin curiously stood up and walked over, but Gong Jia heard his movements. He's awake? Yes. Hua Jin walked to his side and saw that he had caught a small deer. Where did this deer come from? Gong Jia said, this deer broke away from the herd. I saw her at the bottom of a hill. She seemed to have broken her leg. Ah, so pitiful. Well, if it wasn't for me, it might have been eaten clean by the wolves. When Hua Jin heard this, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Even if you brought it back, wouldn't it be eaten clean by you? Being eaten by me is better than being eaten by wild wolves. Wild wolves might leave behind bones. If it was eaten by you, it might not even have a complete corpse. Gong Jia looked at him unhappily. You seem to like arguing with me? I'm bored anyway. Hua Jin sat down beside him. Watching him skinning the deer skillfully, he couldn't help but complain, if I didn't know better, I would have thought that you were a butcher. Get lost. Don't be so fierce. Hua Jin felt wronged. It's so boring. How can I relieve my boredom if I don't talk? You have the strength to talk. Gong Jia snorted. I'm exhausted, so don't bother me. Chapter 44-50. Venison was a delicacy in the world. Even without seasoning, the fresh and tender meat made him yearn for it. He gave the only dry food he had on him to Hua Jin. He was so hungry that his stomach was rumbling, and he still had to peel off the deer skin. God knew that he was almost drooling when he looked at the venison. Fortunately, his luck was good. Not long after leaving the cave, he heard a deer crying at the bottom of the hill. It was relatively smooth. 20 minutes later, Gong Jia put the venison on the fire and handcuffed it happily. Zili, the meat was on fire and made a beautiful sound. Gulp. Gong Jia licked his lips and his eyes widened. Hua Jin looked at the venison skewers on the rack, constantly rotating and handcuffing them evenly. He actually started to crave for it. However, I heard that eating barbecue can easily cause cancer. Hua Jin suddenly came up with a philosophy of health. Gong Jia glanced at him meaningfully. You don't have to eat it. No, I want to eat it. Didn't you say that barbecue can cause cancer? It will be fatal if you don't eat it. Hua Jin spat out another golden sentence. Gong Jia couldn't help but be amused by him. At such a critical moment, this clown could actually make him laugh. However, this venison looks very small. Even if 2 people eat it, they shouldn't be able to finish it. Don't worry, I'm so hungry now that I can swallow a cow. Hua Jin said silently. Usually, people who say that seem to be too hungry, but if they really eat it, their combat strength is not good. Gong Jia glanced at him coldly. Was this guy a bar spirit? Why was he always arguing with him? Don't worry, my combat strength is stronger than yours. In short, when the time comes, the meat will be evenly divided into 2 portions. You eat 1 portion, and I'll eat the other. Okay, I want the leg and breast of the deer. What about me? The butt of the deer. Hua Jin, on purpose, he must be doing it on purpose. Gong Jia gestured with his eyes. Look at the butt of this deer. It looks very fat and tender. I don't want to eat the butt of the deer. If you don't want to eat it, then don't eat it. On what basis? Based on, this deer was brought back by me. Hua Jin was not convinced. You obviously stole it. What do you mean by steal? Isn't it considered stealing? You weren't the one who caught him. If you spout any more nonsense, I'll skin you and roast you. TSK, how could Hua Jin be threatened by him? He rolled his eyes. Perhaps, even he did not realize that he dared to roll his eyes at Gong Jia. Gong Jia pursed his lips and smiled, but he did not say anything. Instead, he continued to handcuff the venison leisurely. His technique was extremely skillful, and the handcuffs were very even. Hua Jin yawned. Half an hour later, the venison was finally cooked. Gong Jia took the venison and cut it into pieces with a dagger. Hua Jin picked up a piece and put it in his mouth. He tasted it. Oh, it's so light, but so tender. There's no seasoning, so of course it's light. Sigh, what a pity. If I sprinkled some cumin, it would be a delicacy in the world. At this juncture, he could not care so much. As long as he could fill his stomach, it was fine. Hua Jin ate with relish. Gong Jia did not really give him the butt of the deer. Instead, he shared the meat of the deer's leg and chest with him. Gong Jia was really hungry. When he ate, he was not as elegant as Hua Jin. He directly hugged a deer leg and gnawed on it. Hua Jin was really shocked by his table manners. He silently complained, the way you eat really looks like the reincarnation of a hungry ghost. Chapter 44-51. After finishing off the remaining meat, Gong Jia and Hua Jin were both full. There were still some leftover meat dregs left. Gong Jia threw these into the fire. They had already eaten as much as possible. They couldn't finish the meat. After a night, the meat would also rot. If they continued to leave it, the fragrance would attract some stragglers or other wild beasts. To be safe. When Hua Jin was about to fall asleep, he vaguely felt someone put a jacket on him. He opened his eyes in a daze and saw Gong Jia walking out. Where are you going? Hua Jin asked in a daze. I'm going to get some firewood. You sleep first. Gong Jia's calm tone made him feel inexplicably at ease. Hua Jin couldn't care less about sleepiness. He hadn't slept well for several days. Therefore, as soon as he closed his eyes, he fell asleep as if he had fainted. When Gong Jia came back with the firewood, Hua Jin was already sleeping soundly. He walked over and surrounded the fire with firewood. Then, he lay down beside Hua Jin. With a thud, Hua Jin's body tilted and his head rested on Gong Jia's shoulder. Gong Jia turned to look at him. His face was right in front of her. Even when he was asleep, he was very quiet and could even be said to be well-behaved. A peaceful sleeping face, just like a little puppy. He actually described him as a little puppy. If Hua Jin was awake and could hear his inner thoughts, he would be so angry that he would bare his fangs and brandish his claws at him. It was unbelievable. Gong Jia breathed a sigh of relief. He never thought that he would risk his life for someone other than Yun Shishir. When he found out that Hua Jin had been kidnapped, he was almost instinctively anxious. Even before this incident, Gong Jia didn't know that this guy had already occupied such a deep-rooted position in his heart. This was probably the most impulsive thing he had ever done in his entire life. He had staked everything on a single throw, putting himself in such a dangerous situation without considering the consequences. However, the moment he saw Hua Jin, all the anxious voices in his heart and mind calmed down. Gong Jia exhaled deeply and closed his eyes. The two of them snuggled up to each other and fell asleep. Outside the cave, the wind was biting cold. From time to time, wild wolves smelled the fragrance of the venison and came over. However, it was fearful of the blazing flames. It shrank back and let out an unwilling howl. Unknowingly, it was already dawn. In a daze, Hua Jin was awakened once by the wolf's howl at dawn. When he opened his eyes, he felt something heavy on his thigh. He lowered his head and saw that Gong Jia had fallen asleep on top of him. No wonder. In his dream, he dreamt that he was lifting weights and his thighs were extremely heavy. It turned out that this fellow was sleeping on his lap. It could be seen that he was really tired. Before seeing him, on the ship, Gong Jia didn't really have a good rest. It was even difficult for him to close his eyes. He slept briefly once, but was woken up by a nightmare. He dreamed that Hua Jin and Alice were also beheaded, and only Natalia was saved. After waking up from the dream, he felt uneasy and didn't dare to sleep anymore. He was afraid that if he slept, the nightmare would come true. At dawn, the wolves were howling, but he didn't wake up. Chapter 44-52. He lowered his head to look at the man. Even though he was in such a sorry state, it couldn't hide his high spirits. He was a clean freak. Not showering for 2 days was probably his limit. What made it hard for him to calm down was, it seemed that no one had ever fought so hard for him before. He had thought that Gong Jia would definitely give up on him. After all, the fighting around them was escalating. East Africa was completely engulfed in the whirlpool of war. If Gong Jia had come alone to save him, he might have been buried with him. But he still came. It wasn't that she wasn't touched. Although the fuse of this incident was the dispute between the Hurricane Group and the Sacred Palace sect, he was also a victim, a fish in the moat that was implicated. But Gong Jia didn't have to save him. But he still came. This proud man had ended up in such a sorry state in order to save him. He was extremely shocked. Hua Jin carefully adjusted his position and protected Gong Jia's head. He closed his eyes and slept for a while. Vermilion Bird brought Alice and Natalia to the port. The car exploded. Although they had jumped out of the car in time, Alice was slightly injured because she was protecting Natalia. And because of the explosion at close range, Vermilion Bird's eardrum was perforated and bleeding. Luckily, Alice checked and found that it wasn't a big deal. The perforated eardrum wasn't serious. With proper treatment, it wouldn't affect her hearing. Vermilion Bird was proud of her eagle-like eyesight and excellent hearing. If her hearing was damaged, she would definitely feel depressed. The car was destroyed, and the supplies were gone. Luckily, Vermilion Bird still had some equipment on her. She hijacked a car halfway, passed through the rain of bullets, crossed the battlefield, and finally reached the port. Vermilion Bird got out of the car and boarded the ship with Natalia and Alice. However, she didn't see Gong Jia and Hua Jin. Where's young Master Jie? He hasn't returned. He hasn't returned? Yeah, he went to save another hostage. There's still no news? No, he successfully rescued the hostages, but Renaud and Ben were sacrificed. Renaud, Vermilion Bird frowned when she heard this. Alice's heart sank when she heard this. Alice said, Renaud will be officially retiring soon. How could this happen? It's not hard to imagine. Red Sparrow said solemnly, now, many areas in East Africa have fallen. Renaud and Ben fought their way in and out. They must have suffered heavy losses. I heard that something happened last night. The people of the Divine Palace sect killed themselves. What? Vermilion Bird and Alice turned pale with fright. How could this be? Then, Natalia asked worriedly, where are the two of them? Have you left safely? According to the information I have, young Master Jia and Hua Jin have already left safely and are less than 40 kilometers away from the harbor. They are trying their best to get here. The war zone has fallen. Those martial artists threaten to blow up the port. If we don't leave now, we'll be in grave danger. We can't leave. Alice said firmly. Gong Jia and Hua Jin aren't here yet. We can't leave. Of course we can't leave. Chapter 44-53. Vermilion Bird added, even if the port is bombed, we can't leave. If there's no other way, make an exception and let the headquarters send reinforcements. Under normal circumstances, Hurricane would never interfere with the internal affairs of other countries. Especially under such circumstances. Vermilion Bird said, send me a few men. I'll bring them to find Gong Jia and the others. No. Alice was the first to object. You're seriously injured and your hearing is damaged. You won't be able to recover in a short period of time. If you bring people over now, you'll be courting death. Then what should we do? Vermilion Bird spread her arms, her face red with anxiety. Do you want us to wait here and do nothing? So what if I'm injured? I can even give up my life to protect young Master Jia. Don't add to the unnecessary losses, Alice said firmly. Didn't they say that they have sent people to rescue them? If we're lucky, young Master Jia might be back soon. 40 kilometers isn't far. It's not far. Vermilion Bird suddenly became agitated. But do you know that all the main roads and transportation fortresses in East Africa have been bombed? The only places we can pass through are the forests and deserts. What does this mean? We'll have to search the mountains and the plains to find two people. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Since you know it's like looking for a needle in a haystack, Alice took a deep breath. Then don't be impatient. Don't act rashly. Act rashly? Vermilion Bird was agitated. Aren't you worried about young Master Jie? Alice's eyes flickered slightly. Vermilion Bird said, now that young Master Jia is in deep danger, you can still speak so casually about not acting rashly. Will it work if you go? Alice exhaled. On the contrary, I'm more worried about Gong Jia than you are. But, if you go there like this, will it definitely work? Why don't you wait a little longer? It won't be too late for you to go if there's really no news. Vermilion Bird bit her lip, her gaze cold. Officer Vermilion Bird, listen to Alice. Don't be so agitated. Young Master Jia also has the ability to protect himself. He also has outstanding experience. In a place like this, he definitely knows how to protect himself. Vermilion Bird was extremely angry. She walked to the railing and ruthlessly punched the railing. The sound of flesh hitting flesh was so clear. Vermilion Bird, I understand your feelings. Alice walked to her side with a complicated expression and gently patted her shoulder. I'm worried about Gong Jia, just like you. But look at how dangerous it was on our way here. You've lost so much of your stamina, and you're injured. If you go over, it'll be a meaningless sacrifice. Why don't you let someone else go? Besides, I've already said that I've already sent people to look for Gong Jia and Hua Jin. Don't worry. The vermilion bird lowered its head and closed its eyes, but did not speak. The bloodstains on her golden hair had already dried up. Together with her sweat, they stuck to her cheeks, making her look incomparably miserable. After a long while, she said gloomily, "Got it, so thirsty." Hua Jin followed behind Gong Jia without stopping for a moment. Besides the heat, there was also the physical exhaustion from the long journey. The water in his body was evaporating at an accelerated rate, and he wanted to drink water. However, the water stored in his bulletproof vest had already been emptied. Chapter 44-54. Come here. Huh? Hua Jin walked over in a daze. What are you doing? Gong Jia opened his bulletproof vest. Drink. That was because the bulletproof vest was worn on his body, and it was usually worn on his chest. If he was wearing the vest, he would be able to drink the water with a straw. The point was, this man was really F***king tall. There was a difference of 10 centimeters, and he was right at his chest. Drinking water and lying on his chest, it looked like he was drinking milk. However, he was really thirsty. Hua Jin asked politely, "Aren't you thirsty?" "Yes." "Then, why don't you drink some first?" Gong Jia raised an eyebrow but did not refuse. He took the straw and took a big gulp. Hua Jin looked at him anxiously. He felt that he was going to drain all the water in the bulletproof vest. "Leave some for me." Hua Jin was anxious. "I feel like I'm dying of thirst." Gong Jia passed the straw to him. Hua Jin walked over and tiptoed slightly. Just as he was about to suck on the straw, he suddenly remembered that Gong Jia had just drunk some water. The straw was stained with his. Was this considered kissing in disguise? Bah! Why did he think so much? Hua Jin closed his eyes and drank contentedly. After a few sips, the straw could not draw any more water. This guy, he wanted to drain all the water in one gulp. However, this gulp had somewhat alleviated the crisis. Hua Jin finally regained some energy. He looked around at the dense forest and felt a little hopeless. Is there a water source nearby? I'm looking for it. How? Hua Jin muttered, I don't have a map. I'm like a headless fly. Gong Jia suddenly stepped on the soil on the ground. Do you see the soil? Moist soil, ants, and earthworms. This means that there's a water source not far from here. Oh, that's amazing. Gong Jia continued, however, in some areas with high mineral content, perhaps the heavy metal content is too high. Drinking it directly is definitely not good for the body. Therefore, although this kind of water can be drunk directly, it must be precipitated and purified before drinking it. So, when you see a water source, draw the water into your bulletproof vest to purify it first. Don't drink it in a hurry, or you'll die. If you drink too much, you'll have diarrhea and become dehydrated. When it came to surviving in the wild, the worst thing was diarrhea, which would increase the loss of water content. The two of them walked one after the other. Sure enough, not long after, Hua Jin vaguely heard the sound of trickling water. I hear the sound of water. Hua Jin said excitedly, there should be water nearby. Yes. Hua Jin followed the direction of the sound of the water and walked in front. Gong Jia couldn't help but stop him. Slow down. What if you fall? Only then did Hua Jin slow down. After walking for a few dozen meters, they finally saw a small stream. Gong Jia walked down and first checked the water quality. It was actually drinkable. He cupped the stream water and took a sip. It was slightly sweet. Wow! It's delicious. It was even better than mineral water. Hua Jin directly buried his head in the water, opened his mouth wide, and drank to his heart's content. Gong Jia drank more elegantly. He cupped the water and drank it sip by sip. Even if he was at the end of his rope, he still maintained his elegant posture. Chapter 44-55. Hua Jin imitated his actions. He took out the water pipe and slowly pumped out the water. As more and more water was pumped out, Hua Jin gradually felt that the bulletproof vest was getting heavier and heavier. Wow. It's so heavy. Gong Jia said, later, be careful when you walk. Don't step on the trap. Along the way, Gong Jia found a few traps used to hunt rabbits and deer. They were probably set up here by the locals. However, this kind of trap was the most old-fashioned kind. Generally, the more advanced traps would catch the prey without causing too much damage. In this way, most of the prey caught would be alive and the meat would be fresh and tender. However, this kind of old-fashioned trap would have infinite strength once it caught something. It was extremely difficult to break free. The prey would die from excessive blood loss. When that happened, the blood would coagulate, and the freshness of the meat would be affected. Got it. Hua Jin filled the bulletproof vest with water and screwed on the valve. After replenishing their supplies, the two of them continued on their journey. They carefully passed through the forest. There was a boundless plain without any shelter. Gong Jia became more and more nervous and cautious. According to experience, such a plain was a shortcut to the war zone. The combatants would use transport vehicles to continuously transport soldiers to the war zone. Therefore, someone would fill this place with landmines. Once the vehicle crossed the line and detonated the landmines, it would immediately flip the vehicle upside down. The landmines were not powerful, but it was enough to blow people up. Gong Jia said, when you walk, look under your feet. If the soil under your feet is sparse, it means that there may be landmines buried. Try to stay as far away as possible. When Hua Jin heard this, he suddenly became nervous. There's such a thing? Yes. Gong Jia pointed at a layer of overturned soil not far away and walked over. Do you see this pit? Hua Jin walked over and saw Gong Jia pulling out a fuse from the pit. This is a landmine that has been detonated. There are some bloodstains on the side. It seems that it has been stepped on. It's too scary. Hua Jin was still scared. I don't dare to walk. Gong Jia said, follow behind me. All right, Hua Jin stuck closely behind Gong Jia. Gong Jia said, do you have to stick so close? Didn't you tell me to stay close? But you don't have to stick to me, do you? Hua Jin took half a step back. Anyway, be careful. Gong Jia held the Fama's rifle and looked through the 4x scope, but he didn't see anyone crouching. They weren't wearing government or anti-government uniforms. No matter which side they encountered, it was extremely dangerous. It was fine that the war hadn't completely broken out. Once it fully erupts, it doesn't matter if you're an armed person or a civilian, as long as you're not in the same team, you'll be shot to death. Give me a weapon too. Gong Jia turned around and was a little surprised. You know how to shoot. I've acted in war dramas before, so the crew organized systematic drills. Gong Jia casually handed over a Desert Eagle to him. Hua Jin fumbled around, loaded it, and then pulled the trigger. But he didn't expect the trigger to be lighter than he imagined. Gong Jia immediately turned around and aimed his gun at the empty space beside him. Chapter 44-56. The dirt and dust that was stirred up made the two of them covered in dust. Gong Jia's eyes were about to spit fire. If he had been a little slower, the bullet would have pierced his abdomen. Are you crazy? Why are you shooting at me? Hua Jin's face was red with embarrassment. I didn't expect the trigger to be so light. I almost died in your hands. Gong Jia was still in shock and stared at him. Put the safety on. Oh. Angrily, Hua Jin put the safety on the gun and carefully guarded it. Gong Jia frowned. Don't touch it unless it's a critical moment. I know. I'm sorry. Hua Jin muttered with a distressed expression. He was scared to death just now and felt that he was holding him back. He thought that if he was not a burden, Gong Jia would not have such a hard time leaving. His stamina was really lagging behind. Even so, Hua Jin gritted his teeth and followed Gong Jia closely. After walking for some time, Gong Jia raised his hand and looked at his watch. The watch was equipped with a smart GPS system. They were about 30 kilometers away from the port. Bad luck. There were no cars on the road. If there was one with wheels, it would reduce the burden of the journey. So tired, the two of them had already traveled 10 kilometers. Along the way, Huajin could not bear to drink water. The skin on his lips had peeled off a few layers. Gong Jie sat down and touched his stomach. He was hungry after such a long time of physical exhaustion. However, he did not have any dry food with him. He could only take out a straw and drink some water. After resting for a while, they continued their journey. Huajin walked unsteadily. The scorching sun was on top of his head. His face was red from the heat. If it was in the past, he would have screamed and yelled. His skin was famous for being allergic. He would get sunburned easily after being exposed to the sun for a long time. But now, even dry food was a problem, let alone protection from the sun. He really wished that he was a solar engine that could convert the sun into his body's power. Huajin stumbled and suddenly stepped on a piece of soft soil. Beep! Gong Jie, who was walking in front, suddenly turned his head. Before his brain could issue an order, his body had already reacted under the condition of reflex and rushed towards Huajin. In an instant, the landmine buried under the soil exploded. Bong! The power of the landmine sent the two of them flying a few meters away. Gong Jie hugged Huajin tightly, and the two of them rolled far away. Until the two of them stopped. Gong Jie sat up and shook his head violently. He looked at Huajin, who was frowning in his arms, and gently patted his face, only to see that his ears were bleeding. His eardrums were slightly damaged because of the explosion. Gong Jie's ears were also slightly blind. However, he sat on the ground and felt a slight tremor. His many years of combat experience told him that a car was coming. He immediately put Huajin down, picked up his rifle, and looked in the direction of the sound, eyeing it covetously. Through his scope, he saw an off-road vehicle driving over shakily. Gong Jie narrowed his eyes, aimed at the windshield, and fired 2 shots. The accurate bullets instantly pierced through the glass. The shattered glass caught the 2 people in the car off guard. Chapter 44:57. Just as he touched the landmine on his waist, he hesitated and retracted his hand. No, I can't blow up the car. Gong Jie stood up and dragged Huajin to a tree. Using the tree as cover, he aimed at the car. Da-da-da, Huajin vaguely heard the sound of gunshots. He struggled to get up, but before he could see what was going on, Gong Jie shielded him with one hand. Don't move. He turned to look at Gong Jie, only to see the latter skillfully reloading his gun with one hand and shooting in a certain direction. Huajin took out the binoculars on his bulletproof vest and saw a car parked not far away. 2 men in plain clothes with guns were shooting in Gong Jie's direction. They had obviously discovered Gong Jie and Huajin's hiding place. Bullets kept hitting the tree trunk. Huajin could not help but tremble with fear. He carefully hid himself behind the tree. He only had a pistol on him, so he could not help Gong Jie. The only thing he could do was to protect himself. The other party was especially cunning and knew how to use the car as a cover. Gong Jie was reluctant to hit the car. His original intention was to kill the 2 men and then take their car. After reloading 3 magazines, the gunshots finally stopped. Gong Jie shot the 2 men and stood up. First, he scanned the surroundings with the scope. When he confirmed that there was no one else, he said to Huajin, I'll go over and take a look. You stay here and watch for me. No, I'll go with you. Huajin stood up. He thought that although he could not help much, he might be able to take a bullet for Gong Jie when necessary. Gong Jie hesitated for a moment and finally nodded. Stay close. Okay. Gong Jie and Huajin walked to the side of the car. There were 2 men lying on the ground. They had been shot in the shoulder and had lost consciousness. When the powerful bullet pierced their shoulders, it also caused a lot of damage to their brains. Or, at such a time, they could only pretend to be unconscious to escape death. However, Gong Jie would not give them such a chance. On the battlefield, there were too many people who pretended to be corpses and shot people in the back. He did not want to be ambushed for no reason. Gong Jia took out a Colt and fired 2 more shots at the 2 unconscious men on the ground. The 2 men's bodies twitched and their legs straightened. "Get in the car." "Okay." Hua Ji nimbly got into the car. Just as Gong Jia started the engine, he saw through the rearview mirror that someone had suddenly popped out from behind the car. It turned out that there was a person crawling under the car, using the car as cover. Hua Jin watched helplessly from the rearview mirror as the man whipped out a pistol. "Be careful." Hua Jin immediately pressed Gong Jia's head and hid behind the seat. Da-da-da, the bullets hit the central control panel. Gong Jia immediately knew that there was someone behind the car. He lowered his head, started the car, put it in reverse, stepped on the accelerator, and ran over the man. The man let out a scream and was knocked to the ground. "Are you okay?" Gong Jia controlled the steering wheel and put the car in gear again. "I'm fine, why are you bleeding?" Hua Jin touched his neck. When the bullet grazed his neck, he did not feel any pain. It was only when he touched the wound that he felt a burning pain. When the bullet passed by, there was a burning pain. Chapter 44-58. At this time, you still care about whether it leaves a scar or not. Gong Jia's face was full of disappointment. He put the car in gear, stepped on the accelerator, and knocked the man who was struggling to get up to the ground again. The car sped away. Hua Jin looked at the 3 corpses behind him with lingering fear. He was still in shock. "Is there enough gas in the car?" "Not much, but it should be enough to drive for 20 kilometers. "Well, that's good." Hua Jin's heart finally calmed down a little. "You said you can shoot, right?" Gong Jia said and threw the rifle to him. "When I ask you to shoot, aim at the ground and shoot a few bullets. If there were landmines, detonate them in advance." This was the most helpless way to eliminate explosives in an emergency situation. Hua Jin held the gun and was a little hesitant. "Do you have enough bullets?" "Only 100 or 200 bullets." "Then, do you want to save some?" "I don't know if we will encounter enemies in the future, but if we save these bullets, the car will be blown up by the landmines." "That's not worth it." "Oh. I understand." Hua Jin followed Gong Jia's instructions and used bullets to eliminate the explosives. As Gong Jia expected, along the way, Gong Jia could see if the soil was turned over. At his order, Hua Jin fired a few bullets at the area. It worked every time. They really eliminated a few areas with landmines. Leaving the plain area, they unknowingly reached the seaside. Following the seaside road, they could smoothly reach the port. However, the road by the sea was devastated by the explosion. The car struggled to move on the road, and the speed had to be reduced to the slowest. Unknowingly, it was already evening. At dusk, the seaside and the horizon became a line. But at this moment, Hua Jin did not dare to let down his guard and enjoy such a beautiful scenery. He was getting closer and closer to the target, but it made him more and more nervous. The wound on his neck was not treated in time. Blood spread to half of his body and dyed his clothes red. Gong Jia looked at it earlier and did not hurt his aorta. This was a blessing in disguise. However, Hua Jin was already riddled with injuries. Previously, he had been whipped and tied up, and there were deep marks on his wrists. In addition to the lack of sufficient supplies along the way, he was already on the verge of collapse and was only supported by his will to survive. Hua Jin hugged his gun, his face pale. Gong Jia said, "Soon. If there are no accidents, we'll be there soon." Hang in there, Hua Jin nodded his head, feeling a little dizzy. His eardrums were already damaged, and the wind was so loud that it almost covered up the sound of Gong Jia. But he knew what Gong Jia was talking about. He was telling him to persevere. At the same time, the people sent by Vermilion Bird were also rushing towards Gong Jia to provide support. The 2 sides finally managed to rendezvous 5 kilometers away from the port. Vermilion Bird was also in the car. When she saw Gong Jie's car, she got out of the car excitedly. Great! Young Master Jie, are you all right? I'm fine. Gong Jie stopped the car. At this moment, Hua Jin was already slumped in his seat, delirious. He opened the car door and nimbly carried Hua Jin out of the car. At this moment, his body was unbelievably weak, and he probably could not walk. Vermilion Bird walked over and said, "Let me do it. I'll carry him into the car." Okay. Vermilion Bird walked over and was about to take Hua Jin from Gong Jie's arms when Hua Jin subconsciously clutched Gong Jie's bulletproof vest. Chapter 44:59. In a daze, he clutched his clothes tightly, unwilling to let go. Vermilion Bird's eyes flickered slightly. For some reason, she felt that Hua Jin's dependence on Gong Jie was unusual. Gong Jie smirked and shielded Hua Jin. He hugged him a little tighter and said to Vermilion Bird, "It's okay. I can carry him." Hua Jin wasn't heavy, and to him, he wasn't even worth mentioning. Now that he was so badly injured, he was worried that Vermilion Bird would be too rough and hurt him. Vermilion Bird nodded and didn't insist. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Alice and Natalia have returned safely with some minor injuries." Natalia was obviously shocked. "I'm afraid that this incident has caused some psychological trauma." "Yeah, it's good that you're fine." Gong Jie, who was hugging Hua Jin, came back to his senses and took a look. Vermilion Bird said to him, "We have to leave this place as soon as possible. Young Master Jie, most of the East African nationals have been evacuated. The war is about to start. Let's leave this place as soon as possible." "Yeah." Gong Jie carried Hua Jin into the car. The car arrived at the port smoothly. After boarding the cargo ship, the medical staff swarmed over. On the ship, the medical staff couldn't perform any major surgery. However, after an examination, Hua Jin didn't suffer any serious injuries. Some of the serious whip wounds had been carefully stitched up. As for the rest, other than the damage to his eardrums and temporary hearing loss, there weren't any major problems. It was just that he was too weak. He hadn't eaten clean food or water for several days and nights. There was a certain degree of bacterial infection in his body. Hua Jin had fainted because of exhaustion. Initially, when they were rushing back, Hua Jin had relied on his astonishing willpower to hold on, so he was fine. However, when they arrived at their destination, he was relieved and immediately fainted. However, the wound was infected. On the ship, Hua Jin had a high fever. Fortunately, after an emergency infusion and treatment, although the fever was erratic, it didn't lead to pneumonia. During the 2 days they were on the boat, Gong Jie stayed close to them. Other than Natalia, Hua Jin was the one he was most worried about. It was very strange. This kind of feeling made him somewhat doubtful. Initially, he didn't think much of it, but now that he had calmed down, he felt that it was too risky to rush into the war zone for a single Hua Jin. He had never been an impulsive person. Especially since his safety was related to the interests of Hurricane. In the past, he had always acted cautiously. He would always think twice before doing anything. However, she had lost her rationality and judgment when it came to him. Thinking about it carefully, if he hadn't been lucky enough, it would have been as difficult as ascending to the heavens to escape from that predicament. In fact, he was also exhausted. Originally, he should have had a good rest, but Alice said that Hua Jin's situation was not very optimistic. Although his life was not in danger, he had a high fever and they did not know how he was doing. On the ship, the medical facilities were limited, and there was no way to make a further diagnosis. Gong Jie was worried, so he kept watch. When he was tired, he would lie beside him or at the end of the bed to rest for a while. In addition to resting, he was also studying. Studying the heart that even he himself could not understand. At first, he had an inexplicable hostility towards Hua Jin. Chapter 44:60. He thought that this was an invasion of territory. Growing up in Hurricane, his sense of territory was especially strong. Now that his territory had been invaded, he was filled with animosity toward Hua Jin. And Hua Jin seemed to be very afraid of him. It wasn't reverence, but pure fear. He seemed to be very afraid of him. Perhaps it was because of his identity, or perhaps it was because of the murderous aura on his body. Gradually, he found another kind of pleasure in Hua Jin. In fact, his attitude toward him had evolved to the point where he was no longer so resistant and repulsive. However, for some reason, when he saw Hua Jin, he strangely wanted to tease him. He liked to see Hua Jin standing in front of him, at a loss. He was careful, as if he was afraid of angering him. The kind of fear that made him want to curl up in a corner. Until later, he actually enjoyed this kind of teasing and never got tired of it. It was a kind of passion that he had never felt even when facing a woman. Alice had once asked him indirectly if he liked men. Men? How was that possible? He didn't like men, but in terms of relationships, because he was busy with work, he was a blank. It wasn't that he wasn't interested in women, it was just that his interest was weak. He was a man with a strong desire to conquer. Other than his career, no one else could arouse his urge to conquer. Hua Jin seemed to be an exception. He was happy to conquer him. When Hua Jin woke up, it was already 5 days later. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a very large room. The curtains were fluttering, and fresh air kept drifting in through the window. He moved his fingers. Other than his fingers, the rest of his body seemed to have stiffened. His entire body was like a broken stone. His head was heavy, and his body was light. He had no idea how long he had been lying there. In fact, he had been lying there for 5 days and 5 nights, relying on the infusion to maintain himself. After lying there for a long time, his limbs were so stiff that he couldn't feel them. Hua Jin tried to sit up. Suddenly, a voice came from beside him. "You're awake?" Hua Jin was so scared that he let out a short cry. He turned his head and saw Gong Jie sitting by the bed, looking at him with raised eyebrows. "You? Why are you here?" "I've been watching over you for 5 days, Gong Jie said with his legs crossed. "If you didn't wake up, I thought you were going to die. Is that how you talk to an injured person?" Hua Jin muttered, "Have I been lying down for 5 days?" "Yes, even when you were unconscious for 2 days and 7 days on the ship, I was already prepared for you to become a vegetable." Hua Jin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Wait a minute, you've been guarding me for 5 days?" He could not help but express his doubt. The young master of the Gong family had actually waited for him for 5 days. "For 2 days on the boat, I've been guarding you for 7 days. Hua Jin was even more suspicious. Why couldn't he believe that Gong Jie had such patience? Gong Jie gave him a sidelong glance. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I'm just hungry, I'll ask someone to prepare the meal." The Gong Jie rang a bell. Not long after, a servant came up with a nutritious meal. There was nutritious porridge, oatmeal, and some steamed vegetables. Most of them were still liquid food. This is so plain. If you eat something too stimulating, your stomach will collapse. In that case. All right. Hua Jin raised his trembling hand but realized that he couldn't even hold the spoon. He was exhausted. He looked at Gong Jie anxiously. Chapter 44-61. Oh. Gong Jie took the spoon away and pushed the bowl of porridge in front of him. Lick it. Lick? Have you ever seen a puppy lick water? Gong Jie held his chin elegantly. The porridge is not hot. It's okay to lick it. Hua Jin snorted and lowered his head, intending to lick and drink it. He was really hungry. When Gong Jie saw this, he immediately took the bowl away. Hua Jin was unhappy. "What? Stop fooling around. I'm really hungry." Gong Jie held the bowl of porridge and stirred it with the spoon. "Beg me, I'll feed you." Pervert. Hua Jin took a deep breath and smiled hypocritically. "I beg you. I can't feel your sincerity." "Boss." Hua Jin continued to show a charming smile. "I beg you, feed me." Because of his charming smile, even Gong Jia couldn't help but fall into a trance. After being stunned for half a second, he pursed his thin lips and scooped a spoonful of porridge to his mouth. Hua Jin took a bite and let out an "ah." It's so sweet. The porridge was actually sweet. In the past, he was famous for being a salty person. He always thought that porridge was either tasteless or salty. This was the first time he tasted sweet porridge. It was as if coconut milk was mixed in. It was very delicious. It's delicious. Eat more if it's delicious. Hua Jin was touched. Since he was young, it seemed that there were very few people who served him porridge, especially a young master like Gong Jia. It was a rare opportunity to be served by him. It was an honor. I didn't expect sweet porridge to be so delicious. Do you want to try it too? Under his encouragement, Gong Jia also took a sip. He raised his eyebrows but didn't say anything. However, it was delicious. Isn't it sweet? After drinking a few mouthfuls of porridge, his empty stomach finally eased a little. Gong Jia fed him very slowly. After all, for someone like him who had not eaten for a long time, his stomach was already very sensitive and weak, so he had to drink more slowly. Hua Jin looked at the way Gong Jia fed him seriously, and his heart was indescribably moved. Hua Jin lowered his head. Thank you. Thank you. Gong Jia looked at him. What are you thanking me for? Thank you for taking care of me these past few days, and you risked your life to save me. If not for him, he would have been burned alive by those bastards. Thank you. Gong Jia's lips curled into a smile with a hint of displeasure. How are you going to thank me? He had intended to thank him, but he did not expect Gong Jia to ask such a question. How should I thank him? Just these 2 words. Gong Jia was obviously skeptical about his so-called gratitude. Hua Jin also felt that he approved of it. Gong Jia seemed to be unable to express his sincerity with just the 2 words, thank you, for taking care of him. However, how should he thank him? Gong Jia came from a privileged background. As the chief commander of the Hurricane Group, he seemed to have nothing to worry about. Perhaps in his eyes, the gratitude that he could give him was not even worth mentioning. How do you want me to thank you? He might as well let him make a request. Gong Jia dismissed it with a smile. That depends on how sincere you are. Otherwise, Hua Jin made a decision that he regretted very much. How about I give myself to you? After he said that, he was amused by his own joke. Gong Jia did not laugh, but his gaze deepened. The porridge bowl was suddenly put down. Chapter 44-62. Hua Jin was shocked by his serious expression. He retreated and retreated until his back touched the bed. There was nowhere to hide. He swallowed nervously. This man couldn't have taken it seriously, right? Or was he just trying to scare him? This man seemed to really like to scare him and tease him. While his mind was in a mess, Gong Jia got closer and closer. In the blink of an eye, his handsome face was so close that he could not escape. Devote yourself to me? Gong Jia suddenly snorted. His breath, which was like orchids, attacked his face and lips unscrupulously, making his heart beat faster. Hua Jin's breathing was about to stop. Gong Jia, that's what you said. Gong Jia's voice became hoarse and deep, but it was extremely sexy. When he said this, his Adam's apple moved clearly, as if he was prepared for something. Hua Jin did not know why, but his whole brain was pulled into a mess. In the next second, Gong Jia lowered his head. His thin lips were slightly opened and gently but tremblingly covered his lips. His lips were inexplicably cold. However, when his thin lips were slightly opened, the temperature between his lips and teeth was like magma, almost melting his lips. He kissed him. Such a realization subverted all of Hua Jin's willpower. He wanted to struggle, but his hand, which had been in a coma for 7 days, did not have the strength to lift it, let alone resist his invasion. This way, Gong Jia could casually taste him. There was still a little sweet porridge left on his lips. He kissed the small and cute rice together. The sweetness in his mouth, he did not know if it came from the remnants of the sweet porridge or from the taste between his lips and teeth. Gong Jia, Hua Jin called out his name in a daze. Gong Jia, however, turned a deaf ear. When he kissed him, perhaps only then did he realize that he had been planning this for a long time. Hua Jin could not tell if the man was being serious or just teasing him with the kiss that he had been planning for a long time. Ugh, Hua Jin couldn't hold on any longer and slipped onto the bed. Gong Jia bent down and took advantage of the favorable position to go deeper and deeper. Kissing him felt so sweet. At first, he was only testing the waters by lingering on his lips. Slowly, he became dissatisfied and gently pried open his teeth. Ugh, a sweet and fragrant breath overflowed from between her lips and teeth. He tasted it to his heart's content, as if he was tasting a cup of thick tea or a fragrant dessert. Gong Jia pinched his face, but he didn't want to hurt him, so he loosened his grip. Just as Hua Jin was out of breath, he finally let go of him. At this time, Hua Jin was already fiercely stunned, and his entire body was stiff to the point he was unable to move. Yes, it's very sweet. Gong Jia looked into his eyes and smiled. It's sweeter than porridge. Hua Jin's face lit up at the mention of these words. He blushed, and his face looked like it was on fire. He had too many questions to ask, but there were too many uneasiness that he had nowhere to ask. Gong Jia straightened up and saw that Hua Jin was motionless. He knew that his sudden kiss seemed to have frightened him quite a bit. A joke, as if it was too big. Hua Jin's mind was in a mess. The most chaotic thing was that his body and his instincts didn't seem to have much resistance to Gong Jia. What was wrong with him? What was going on? Chapter 44-63. Hua Jin asked in a daze, why? At this moment, only these 3 words could show his chaotic state of mind. What was this Gong Jia doing? Was he teasing him? Otherwise, why did he kiss him? However, if he was teasing her, why did she sense the complicated feelings in his kiss? After acting for so many years, he could feel whether there was any emotion in a kiss or a look. Gong Jia's kiss made his heart, which was already in a mess, even more chaotic. Gong Jia suddenly smiled. Why? What do you mean why? Why did you kiss me? Let's be together. Gong Jia also said something that undoubtedly messed up Hua Jin's state of mind even more. Perhaps, if it were not for this accident and the fact that they had not survived a disaster together, Gong Jia would not have been able to understand his state of mind. But since he had kissed him, it meant that he had already seen through his own heart. Since he had seen through it, given Gong Jia's straightforward and domineering character, he would openly express his feelings. He hated it the most when he obviously liked someone and had feelings for him, but was still hesitant. This wasn't his style of doing things. Hua Jin choked. He didn't expect Gong Jia to make such a request. Be together? Hua Jin deliberately changed the topic. Aren't we together now? Gong Jia said, don't play dumb. Hua Jin was speechless. Hua Jin's skills were nothing in Gong Jia's eyes. Changing the topic? Gong Jia naturally wouldn't give him such a chance. I'll give you time to think about it. Gong Jia sat on the side of the bed with his arms crossed. Rather than saying that he was giving him time to think about it, it was better to say that he was forcing him to give in. It was domineering and domineering. This was Gong Jia. Hua Jin lowered his head. His thoughts were still in a mess. In less than 5 seconds, Gong Jia turned his head and asked, have you made up your mind? It hadn't even been 5 seconds. He only asked if she had made up her mind. Didn't you say you would give me time to think about it? Gong Jia raised his wrist and looked at his watch. It's been half a minute. You call this giving me time to consider? What else? How long do you want? Gong Jia raised his eyebrows. It's just a few words. How long do you need to think about it? 1 day? 1 month? A year? If you agree, it's good. If you don't, it's bad. Hua Jin asked curiously, what if I agree? Then let's be together. What if I don't agree? You can't escape. Can't escape? Hua Jin complained, am I prey? We'll be together sooner or later. Hua Jin finally broke down. Then why did you ask me to consider it? We're going to be together sooner or later anyway. When Gong Jia heard that, he smiled and gently put his arm around the back of his neck. You're quite self-aware. Since we're going to be together sooner or later, then there's no need to hesitate. Hua Jin really didn't know how to answer. My mind is a little messy. I'm tired and sleepy. I want to rest for a while. Oh. Gong Jia stood up and ordered the servants to clear the plates. Then he said to him, have a good rest then. Hua Jin didn't say a word. He let him cover him with the blanket, lay on the bed, and closed his eyes. He heard the door close. Gong Jia left. Hua Jin closed his eyes and forced himself to fall asleep quickly. Chapter 44-64. He recalled how the two of them had first played a punishment game and touched each other's lips through a tissue. He also recalled every scene with him, until they were in East Africa. Especially when he thought of how he slept so peacefully on his lap and how touched he was when he risked his life to save him. If he didn't like him enough, how could a proud man like Gong Jia bear so many dangers for him, weave through the rain of bullets and appear in front of him? Gong Jia liked him. This knowledge completely subverted Hua Jin's rationality. It wasn't that he had never been liked by a man. However, there had never been a time when it was as shocking as Gong Jia's words. Hua Jin recuperated in bed for a few days. During this period, Gong Jia didn't come again. Alice also came to see him and told him about Natalia's situation. Natalia changed into a typical psychological trauma after a kidnapping. After all, she was still such a young child. She had witnessed Professor Romanka's throat being cut and beheaded with her own eyes. That bloody visual stimulation had become a nightmare in her heart until now. These few days, Alice, Yu, and Gong Jia took turns to accompany her. Natalia's psychological trauma was very serious. It could be seen from her sleep. Often, in the middle of the night, she would suddenly wake up screaming and crying because of nightmares. She would lock herself in the room alone. Whenever someone walked around outside the door, she would be so scared that she would hide under the bed and tremble. Once, when Alice drank red wine, she looked at the scarlet liquid as if she was looking at blood. Natalia was so agitated that she started crying. When she saw ropes, iron things, especially iron chains, she would subconsciously hide far away. After being tortured by nightmares for a long time, Natalia had a high fever and lay in bed for a long time. Gong Jia had to accompany her all the time. Therefore, he rarely came to Hua Jin's place. After Hua Jin's fever subsided, he recovered very quickly and was soon able to get out of bed and walk around. When he heard that Natalia had a fever, he wanted to go and take a look. Alice advised him not to go. Why? Because when she sees you, she feels fear. Fear? Hua Jin didn't understand. Why? I don't visit Natalia much anymore. Because you, me, and her are all victims of hijacking. When she sees you, she will think of the time when she was kidnapped and the torture and fright she had to endure. Moreover, she's currently running a high fever and is unconscious. If you go, she might hallucinate that she's still in the Divine Hall sect and hasn't been rescued yet. When she was kidnapped, Natalia had been too desperate. She was so desperate that she felt that they were done for. Even after they returned to Dark Wind Island, Natalia continued to ask Alice if she was dreaming, if she hadn't woken up yet. If she had woken up, would they still be in the hands of the believers of the Temple of Light? Would they still be in that dark, damp, and devoid of freedom in that abandoned basement? Every time this happened, Alice would feel very anxious. Gong Jia is with her now. You don't have to worry too much. He will take good care of her. Alice paused for a moment before saying, Shao Jia has changed a lot. He actually knows how to take care of people. When Hua Jin heard the name Gong Jia, his eyes flashed slightly. Chapter 44-65. Alice was an astute person. When she saw Hua Jin's strange expression, she quickly detected it. What's wrong? Why did your expression change when Gong Jia was mentioned? Hua Jin touched his face. Did I? Yes. Could it be that Gong Jia had mentioned that matter to her? Hua Jin asked indirectly, did Gong Jia say anything to you? Oh. Alice's interest was piqued. Do you think he would say anything to me? Hua Jin's expression suddenly became uneasy. How could he have forgotten that Alice was a psychologist? She was the best at reading a person's mind. He felt like he was completely naked in front of her. Even his body was transparent. Whatever he was thinking in his heart was completely seen through by her. Hua Jin, you've become very strange. Could it be that there's a secret between you and Shao Jie? No. Hua Jin suddenly denied agitatedly. However, the more agitated he was, the more suspicious Alice found him. Yu suddenly walked over with a drink and sat down beside Hua Jin. Uncle Hua Jin, are you feeling better? Much better, Yu. Yu suddenly looked at him as if she had seen a ghost. Hua Jin felt even worse. What's wrong? Is there something strange on my face? No. It's just, why is your face so red? Hua Jin was speechless. Alice muttered, if there's something on your mind, just say it. You can't hide your thoughts at all. Everything is written on your face. Something must have happened between you and Shao Jie. Otherwise, you wouldn't be like this. I think Shao Jie has been acting strange recently. Yu looked at Hua Jin and then at Alice. She lowered her head and obediently sucked on the cola through the straw. Hua Jin finally couldn't take it anymore. He finished the red wine in his glass in one gulp and looked at Alice with a flushed face. Alice held the wine glass. She was so frightened by his serious expression that she didn't dare to move. Let me ask you. Please go ahead. Gong Jia, his sexual orientation, pfft. Yu couldn't hold it in and spat it all over his face. Hua Jin closed his eyes from the spray, and his face was covered in coke. Fortunately, he had a good temper, but the boy still got up and hurriedly wiped him with a handkerchief. Sorry, I couldn't help it. Alice held back her laughter and asked patiently, why are you asking this? Gong Jia's sexual orientation? What's the matter? Yu was also curious. Don't tell me. Uncle confessed to you? Hua Jin was speechless. Seeing Hua Jin's face getting redder and redder, Yu was glad that she didn't have cola in her mouth. Otherwise, she would have spat it all over Hua Jin's face. Ha 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 ha. Alice couldn't hold it in anymore. She slapped the table and laughed. So that's the problem. Hua Jin, tell me, did Gong Jia confess to you? Facing Alice and Yu's big curious eyes, Hua Jin wanted to vomit blood. What kind of exciting thing is this? He really confessed. Alice and Yu clapped excitedly, ignoring Hua Jin's darkened face. Hua Jin almost roared out loud. What was this worth clapping about? You don't understand. Alice smiled in relief. There was another reason why she and Yu were so excited. Alice, on the other hand, liked Gong Jia. This was something that everyone in Hurricane City had a tacit understanding about. Chapter 4466. However, if the person Gong Jia liked was a man, she would feel much better. So, Gong Jia liked Hua Jin. Why did she feel so happy? On the other hand, Yu was happy that her uncle's marriage was finally settled. Plus, everyone could see Gong Jia's feelings for Hua Jin. Although it was hazy, it was still a psychological foundation. Shao Jia is really special to you. Alice said, no matter who it is, other than Yun Shishir, Yu, and Xiao Yichen, Natalia, I really can't think of anyone he would work so hard for. Hua Jin blushed even more. Is that so? Wow, your face is even redder, Yu teased. If I didn't know better, I would have thought that you had blusher on. Hua Jin couldn't help but want to punch him. Alice said to Hua Jin, what about you? What do you think of Gongjie? Thoughts? What thoughts? Nothing much, Io. Yu nudged Hua Jin's arm and started to praise her uncle. What's wrong with my uncle? He's rich, powerful, and handsome. The girls who are chasing after him would line up from here to Siberia. You should be happy that such a man has taken a liking to you. Hua Jin gritted his teeth. I'm not a girl. Actually, your problem is very simple. Alice showed the demeanor of a relationship guru. She raised a finger as if she was going to point out everything. Feeling nervous all of a sudden, he gulped and asked seriously, what's the problem? Between men, it's just a matter of who's at the top and who's at the bottom. Hua Jin's mind was in a mess. He had thought that Alice would give some sort of constructive speech. But in the end, it was this. Yu was confused. What do you mean by who's on top and who's on the bottom? Why can't I understand? Hua Jin covered his mouth with an ashen face. Don't ask such questions. This Alice. Yu was still around. Was she trying to lead you astray? Alice said, Hua Jin, don't struggle anymore. Just give in to Shao Jia. Yes. Yu nodded solemnly. Let's do as uncle says. Follow your sister. Hua Jin gulped down a mouthful of red wine in a fit of anger. Two pig teammates. You've just recovered. Don't drink too much. Alice suddenly looked at him with a pitiful expression. I think the reason why you're so worried is because of a sense of powerlessness. What sense of powerlessness? That is, Alice's gaze became even more sympathetic. When you're with Shao Jia, he's obviously on top. You can only be on the bottom. On top. On the bottom? She suddenly blurted out a few unfamiliar terms. Yu was curious. What do you mean? What's on top and bottom? Hua Jin couldn't take it anymore and covered his mouth again. Don't ask such questions. With that, Hua Jin gulped down another mouthful of red wine. Alice and Yu looked at each other, then their gazes fell on Hua Jin. At night, Gong Jia went back to his room after coaxing Natalia to sleep. However, just as he reached the door of the room, he saw a figure leaning against the wall. When he got closer, he saw that the figure was Hua Jin. Gong Jia's lips stiffened. What are you doing here? Hua Jin turned around unsteadily. When he heard the voice, he straightened his body with difficulty. It's you. Chapter 44-67. Why are you here? Hua Jin pointed at him, turned around, and knocked on the door. This is my room. It was obvious that this guy was drunk. Gong Jia cast a sidelong glance at him and raised an eyebrow. Drunk? Drunk? Hua Jin was tongue-tied. Huh? What did you say? You're really arrogant. Hua Jin poked his face with his finger. This action was no doubt akin to stroking a tiger's whiskers. The tiger was still looking at him with his eyebrows raised. He was indifferent to his provocative behavior. Hua Jin poked his cheeks. Gong Jia's skin was very tender, and he even took better care of it than he did. What skincare products are you using? Why is your skin so good? Are you done? Gong Jia stood up straight. Hua Jin could only reach his shoulders. If he didn't stand up straight, he could only reach his chest. He seemed to feel that he wasn't as tall as him and didn't have the confidence to speak. Hence, he tiptoed and puffed out his chest. Why are you so tall? Squat down a little. Gong Jia snorted and lowered his head to look at his eyes. What do you want? To hit you. Dong. Hua Jin's fist landed on his head. It wasn't heavy, but it was definitely not light either. However, for Gong Jia, it was as if his fist had landed on cotton. His alcohol tolerance didn't seem to be good. Gong Jia tried to bear with it and pushed him away. When he was about to open the door, Hua Jin blocked him. What? What are you doing? Hua Jin tilted his head and pointed at him. What do you want to do in my room? Gong Jie didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He reminded him, "This is my room. You want to sleep in my room? This is my room." Gong Jie's patience had run out. He opened the door and walked in with him. Hua Jin was carried into the room like a little chick. He struggled for a while, but Gong Jie did not allow him to struggle at all. He directly carried him into the bathroom. In no time at all, they stripped him of his clothes and threw him into the bathtub. Hua Jin slumped in the bathtub in defeat and did not move an inch. Gong Jie walked out of the bathroom, went to the wardrobe, and took out 2 clean bathrobes. Just as he walked into the bathroom, he saw that Hua Jin had already fallen into the bathtub. Unknowingly, the water had already covered his face. The water entered his nose and throat, causing him to cough a few times. Gong Jie's gaze turned cold. He rushed over and hugged his body a little. "You're so drunk." He was dead drunk. How much did he drink? He didn't even know that he choked on the bathwater. Hua Jin's head was very dizzy. After saying I for a long time, his head leaned on Gong Jie's shoulder with a thud, and he stopped moving. He was like a salted fish that had struggled for a long time and finally had a power outage. Gong Jie tried to bear with it. He had not fully recovered yet, but he had drunk so much. Gong Jie had no choice but to fish him out. He covered him with a large bath towel and hugged him. Dawn. Hua Jin woke up because of a hangover. As he had been fasting for so long, his stomach was already weak. Coupled with the fact that he had drunk so much, his stomach hurt badly. It was fine if he did not wake up, but when he woke up, he saw Gong Jie's sleeping face right in front of him. Chapter 44-68. The two of them were so close that he could even smell the fragrance of the body lotion on his body. Hua Jin cautiously lifted the blanket and saw that he was also wrapped in a towel. His head was hurting even more. He seemed to have gotten drunk last night. He was so drunk that he could only remember walking along the corridor unsteadily. He couldn't recognize where his room was. The castle was too big. He was like a lonely soul wandering around. However, he couldn't remember what happened after that. Why was he in Gong Jie's room and on his bed? The scariest thing was that both of them were only wrapped in a towel. What happened after that? Could it be? Hua Jin was so scared that he burped. The smell of alcohol from his breath hit Gong Jie's face. Gong Jie was awakened by the smell of alcohol. When he opened his eyes, the two of them looked at each other. Hua Jin was even more embarrassed. Was it too late for him to close his eyes and pretend to be asleep? "You're awake?" Gong Jie sat up and held his forehead. "Are you sober?" "I should be awake. Was I very drunk last night?" Before Hua Jin could finish his sentence, Gong Jie looked at him coldly. "What do you think?" Hua Jin suddenly felt guilty. Your body hasn't recovered and you drank so much?" Were these words considered as showing concern for him? Hua Jin sat up and patted his face. However, he deliberately kept a distance from him. Gong Jie looked at him and couldn't help but mock him. "Now you know to keep a distance from me? You weren't so reserved when you threw yourself at me yesterday." "Throw myself at me?" Hua Jin resisted the urge to scream and covered his face. "What happened between us yesterday?" Gong Jie heard and asked, "What do you want to happen?" "I don't want anything to happen at all. What shouldn't have happened has happened." Tisk. Hua Jin sucked in a breath of cold air with lingering fear. Did it really happen? Could it be that he was beastly and ate him up yesterday? Wait, that's impossible, right? Since everything that shouldn't have happened had already happened, then why didn't he feel anything at all? Could it be that he was an acupuncture mushroom? That was impossible. Hua Jin couldn't help but glance at a certain part of his body. Gong Jie's gaze turned even colder. "What are you thinking about?" "And nothing." Hua Jin retracted his gaze in embarrassment and didn't say another word. The atmosphere was very awkward. Gong Jie lay down. He hadn't slept well the whole night, so he planned to make up for it later. This time, Hua Jin was even more embarrassed. I didn't do anything. Gong Jia interrupted him. I didn't say that. Hua Jin asked in a roundabout manner, did I say anything nonsense yesterday? Yes, but I don't understand. For example? You said that you want to be on top. Hua Jin almost vomited blood on the blanket. He wanted to scream. It was indeed true that drinking would spoil things. Did he really say that? What do you mean by on top and on top? It was fine if Hua Jin didn't mention it. Now that he did, Gong Jia was very curious about the meaning of on top and on top. Hua Jin was trembling. He wished that he had a tool that could turn back time. He only hoped that none of this had happened. However, didn't he know the meaning of on top and on top? Chapter 44-69. Didn't he like men? In that case, he should know the meaning of these two words. Seeing that Hua Jin was silent, Gong Jia asked again, you said that you want to be on top. What do you mean by that? Hua Jin's face turned red. It was better not to explain this question. I'm talking nonsense. Just forget about it. Hua Jin deliberately changed the topic. Gong Jia, what? Do you have some hidden illness that you can't talk about? The two of them were lying on the same bed, but nothing happened. Moreover, from what Yu and Alice had said, Gong Jia didn't have any women or men around him for so many years. Could it be that there was some problem in that area? Hua Jin's back was facing Gong Jia, so he didn't realize that Gong Jia had suddenly stretched out an arm and grabbed his waist. The next second, Hua Jin felt his body bouncing on the bed. Then, Gong Jia pressed him under his body and looked at him meaningfully. Are you doubting my ability? Gong Jia sneered and said, it seems that you were hoping for something to happen last night? No. Were you hoping that I would do something to you? Hua Jin was so angry that his face turned red. No. I was just concerned. Concerned? Alice said that you didn't have any women or men around you for so many years. Therefore, any normal person would be concerned about whether you have some problem in that area. Concerned? In what capacity are you concerned about me? Gong Jia was interested. Hua Jin was even more embarrassed. Gong Jia's smile was devilishly charming. Whether I have any problem, do you want to verify it yourself? As he said that, his handsome face got closer and closer. That deep gaze seemed to suck his soul into the abyss. Verify it himself? There's no need for that, right? Before he could finish his sentence, Hua Jin could clearly feel a change in Gong Jia's body. He was obviously scared to death. You feel it? Gong Jia smirked. So you like the strong one? Don't like abstinence? Do you have a masochistic physique? I like to be abused. You're the masochist. Sorry, I'm a recognized S-type. Gong Jia leaned close to his ear and whispered, I'm the only one who bullies others. No one has ever dared to bully me. You. Get up. I'm going back to my room. If I let you go like this, wouldn't it be even more obvious that there's something wrong with me? Men hated it the most when others questioned this aspect of the issue. Gong Jia felt that it was time to let Hua Jin personally test what kind of problem he had in bed. Gong Jia. Hua Jin suddenly called his name. Gong Jia was stunned. What is it? I want to ask you. Hua Jin mustered up his courage. What you said to me last time, were you serious or just teasing me? What did I say? You said that when we're together. Hua Jin clenched his fists. Are you serious? Gong Jia smiled. It seems that my attitude wasn't clear enough. What? Before Hua Jin could question him, Gong Jia suddenly lowered his head and kissed him gently on the lips. Hua Jin's body stiffened and he didn't dare to move. Chapter 44-70. What surprised Hua Jin was not his kiss. It was Gong Jia's kiss that his body instinctively welcomed. Why did it turn out this way? Why did he indulge himself so much and fall into his precious tenderness? Huajin closed his eyes helplessly. For a moment, he could not figure out his wavering heart. Gong Jia was a man. He was also a man. In this world, it was not unusual for men and women to fall in love with each other. Now that society was more open, some people were born to like the same sex. This was innate. However, it was obvious that he and Gong Jia were not born to like men. If they really liked men, they would not have feelings for women. Could it be that they were bisexual? Hua Jin's mind was blank, so much so that he did not notice when Gong Jia left his lips. When he finally regained his senses from the kiss, Gong Jia could not help bursting into laughter when he saw the confused look on his nephew's face. Why do you have such an expression? What expression? Facing death with equanimity, a heroic sacrifice. Hua Jin rubbed his face with his hands and simply covered his face. Ugh, how embarrassing. When Gong Jia saw this, he laughed and reached out to push his hands away, forcing him to look at him. Hua Jin, listen to me, I'll tell you. Gong Jia exhaled softly and said to him, it's not because you're a man that I like you. It's because you're Hua Jin that I want you. Like men? Like women? Why should I suppress my feelings because of my gender? So what if the person I like is a man? Some people think that this is a very disgusting thing. Gong Jia sneered. Why should I care about other people's opinions? What does other people think of me have to do with me? His arrogant tone was simply insufferably arrogant. Such boldness was worthy of the name Gong Jia. Hua Jin stared at him, unable to regain his senses for a long time. It's not because you're a man that I like you. It's because you're Hua Jin that I want you. For the whole day, Hua Jin sat on the edge of the beach and stared blankly at the waves washing the beach. Yu walked over to him with 2 iced coconuts and handed one to him. Here. Iced coconut. Thank you. Hua Jin took the coconut and bit it. However, his eyes were still lifeless as he looked in a certain direction. Yu waved her hand in front of his eyes, but there was no reaction. Gong Jia's words kept replaying in his mind and his heart was greatly shaken. Arrogant, domineering, insufferably arrogant. He was both envious and yearning for Gong Jia. Such a proud man. He was as free as the wind. No one could restrain him. Yu said coldly, you've been sitting here for the whole day. Hua Jin finally came back to his senses. You're here. You just realized that I'm here? Who did you take the coconut from just now? Hua Jin lowered his head and looked at the coconut in his hand. He was confused. Where did the coconut come from? Yu looked at him with a, you're hopeless, expression. You look like you've lost your soul. What's wrong? Hua Jin smiled helplessly. I was distracted just now. Chapter 44-71. Yu, I have a question that I don't quite understand. Hua Jin gazed blankly at the horizon and asked impassively, what is love like? What is the feeling of liking someone? Yu was taken aback. He held his chin helplessly and the corners of his lips twitched. You're actually asking a 10-year-old child what love is? Hua Jin was speechless. Why don't I bring my grandpa here? He should know what love is. I heard that he and grandma are very much in love. He should be qualified to answer your question. Wait. Hua Jin pulled him back. He was scared out of his wits. Why did you bring your grandpa here? If he knew that his son liked him, he might turn green with anger. Because I can't answer your question. Then don't answer it. But I saw that you were so distracted when you answered the question. It was as if you had lost your soul. You sat down beside him. Are you worried about your relationship with uncle? Hua Jin didn't think much of it. What can happen between me and him? I don't understand. Yu continued to rest his chin on his hand and sighed helplessly. Love is our own business. Why do we need to invite others to comment on it? Shouldn't we do what we want to do? Do you need others to give you the courage and reason to love someone when you're in love? Could it be that you can love whoever others want you to love, and you can't love whoever others don't want you to love? Don't you have your own will? Yu Yu was obviously a child, but the words that came out of his mouth stunned Hua Jin for a long time. If I like someone, I don't care what others think. As long as I've decided on someone, I don't care what others think. Yu Yu's words revealed a charisma that didn't match his age. Hua Jin said in a daze, "You're indeed Gong Jie's nephew. Your styles are exactly the same." It was simply tyrannical. What if that person doesn't like you? Yu Yu laughed when she heard this. How is this possible? I'm so outstanding. Why wouldn't that person like me? His logic was exactly the same as Gong Jie's. Hua Jin hesitated. Then, what if I'm not that outstanding? Then work hard to become more outstanding. Yu Yu stretched out her arms and lay on the beach. She closed her eyes and said, "The world of adults is really complicated." Perhaps it was because this world was complicated by the adults. Actually, feelings are very simple, but there are people who want to be well matched in terms of social status, and there are people who want so-called fairness. Scheming against each other and deceiving each other. There were so many reasons why they had to be so calculative about their relationship. Wasn't liking someone very simple? Moreover, I feel that you also have feelings for Uncle. It's just that you haven't noticed it yet. How can you tell? As long as you see my uncle, your face will turn red and you will become very restrained. That's because you're afraid. Is it really because you're afraid? Yu Yu looked at him with disdain. Isn't it too sad that a person doesn't even have the courage to face his own feelings? His words were like a basin of cold water pouring over her head. Chapter 44-72. Unknowingly, Yu Yu had already left the beach. In the blink of an eye, it was already dusk. The sun was setting in the west. Hua Jin lay on the spot where Yu Yu had been lying. His mind was filled with Yu Yu's words. Isn't it too sad that a person doesn't even have the courage to face his own feelings? Did he really have feelings for Gong Jie? Was it fear or admiration? Hua Jin admitted that he did admire Gong Jie. But was admiration the same as love? He really couldn't understand. Yin Shishir didn't know that Hua Jin had met with an accident. Gong Jie didn't tell her because he didn't want her to worry. After the incident, Gong Jie called Yin Shishir and told her about it. Yin Shishir was scared out of her wits when she found out. Is Hua Jin alright? Gong Jie was a little speechless when he heard this. Sis, why are you worried about him first? Haven't you thought about me? Aren't you fine now? Gong Jie said aggrievedly, I'm injured. Injured? Is it serious? Yin Shishir's tone suddenly became nervous. Shao Jie, don't scare me. How did you get injured? Sure enough, the crying child gets candy. This saying isn't without reason. I'm not made of steel. I'm made of flesh and blood. If Hua Jin can get injured, why can't I? Yin Shishir felt guilty when she heard this. I'm sorry. In my heart, Shao Jie has always been indestructible. I didn't expect you to get injured. Is it serious? It's fine. It's just a small injury. I was just joking. I just felt uneasy. Yin Shishir heaved a sigh of relief when she heard this. You're scaring me again. I was wrong, sis. Actually, it's my fault too. I can't neglect my concern for you just because you're Gong Jie. Yin Shishir smiled. Shao Jie, I miss you. The words, I miss you, made Gong Jie's heart burst with joy. However, Gong Jie had always been introverted. Even if he was happy, he did not show it on his face. I miss you too, sister. If I have time, I'll fly to Haifeng Island. No need. When the time comes, I will visit you with my father. All right. Ever since she got over Gong Shaoying, Yin Shishir would often talk to him on the phone. Yin Shishir had no resentment towards her father. It was just that he had hurt her mother and Yu Yu. However, Gong Shaoying was very sincere about it, so Yin Shishir was relieved. The reunion between father and daughter could be considered as fulfilling one of her wishes. Sometimes, Yun Shishir felt that she was too blessed. She had a husband who doted on her like a daughter, 2 sons who protected her like a princess, a younger brother who doted on her, and now, a father who loved her dearly. She was really more doted on than Yueyao. "Sis, I have something to announce to you," Gong Jie suddenly said over the phone. Yun Shishir came back to her senses. "Okay, go ahead." "I like Hua Jin." Gong Jie raised his eyebrows and smiled. "I want to be with him." Yun Shishir was slightly stunned, but she did not show too much shock. Instead, she asked tentatively, "You're not joking again, are you?" "I'm serious." Yun Shishir pondered for a moment. This matter was too sudden, but before this, it was not untraceable. She could tell that Gong Jie's attitude towards Hua Jin was very special. Chapter 4473. However, since Gong Jie was serious about this matter, Yun Shishir naturally expressed her support. "If you really like him, then as your sister, of course, I wish you happiness." In her opinion, no matter who Gong Jie liked, whether it was a man or a woman, as long as he liked her, she would support him. Just like back then, when he found out that Yun Shishir was going to marry the Mu family, which opposed the Gong family, Gong Jie still supported her unconditionally. Although Gong Jie did not like Mu Yaja very much from the beginning. But for her sake, Gong Jie tried his best to build a relationship with this brother-in-law of his. Then, what about Hua Jin? How does he feel about you? He doesn't like him. Yun Shishir said. Then you said you want to be with him. It's only a matter of time. Shao Jia, you can't be so overbearing. You can't force yourself on him. He obviously doesn't like you, so you can't force him. He dares. Could she say that from a certain point of view, her brother's personality was very similar to someone else's? Are you that overbearing? It's a so-so. Mu Yaja is also very overbearing. Otherwise, how did he manage to get you? Yun Shishir's face instantly turned as red as a persimmon. At the side, Mu Yaja was originally reading the newspaper when he was inexplicably implicated. When he heard Gong Jie's words, he snorted unhappily. Don't compare me to you. Brother-in-law is also here? Yes, Yun Shishir thought that Gong Jie had said something bad about Mu Yaja. Feeling guilty, she immediately said, your brother-in-law won't stoop to your level. If you didn't like him so much, I might not have approved of him as my brother-in-law. Yun Shishir was speechless. The smell of gunpowder was very strong. Mu Yaja put down the newspaper. The old cadre reached out his hand and took the phone. You have something against brother-in-law? Of course. How are you worthy of my sister? How am I not worthy? I won't lower myself to your level. Gong Jie glanced at him haughtily before asking nonchalantly, speaking of which, what tricks did you use to trick my sister into joining you? Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows. Why? Do you want to learn from me? His goal had been seen through. Gong Jie cleared his throat awkwardly, but he still showed a look of disapproval. It's definitely not some honorable method. It doesn't matter whether it's open or not. What's important is that your sister is now my wife. Gong Jie was speechless again. Yun Shishir watched coldly from the side. Although he knew that Gong Jie and Mu Yaja seemed to be getting along well on the surface, but in fact, they were secretly opposing each other. However, there was no need for them to be so hostile towards each other. The way they communicated with each other was more crude than the last. Since you're so humble, I'll teach you. Gong Jie actually listened to her seriously. Push him down. If once isn't enough, then do it twice. There's no such thing as a relationship that can't be sublimated in bed. The only way to raise the temperature of a relationship is to extend it from the body to the mind. Yun Shishir couldn't take it anymore. She snatched the phone and covered Mu Yaja's face with a pillow. What are you up to? Are you trying to lead my brother astray? Mu Yaja took down the pillow and looked a little confused. Isn't that the case? Your brother is an adult and a man. Do you still treat him as a child? Chapter 44-74. Wuxia shrugged, picked up the newspaper, and started to read it. Xianxia blushed. She looked at the phone screen and saw Gong Jia looking at her thoughtfully. Ignore your brother-in-law's words. Gong Jia pondered for a moment. I understand. What do you understand? The fastest way to warm up a relationship. Gong Jia's lips curled into a smile. Xianxia felt her hair stand on end. After ending the call, Xianxia raised the phone and questioned Wuxia bitterly. Look at how bad you've taught Xiao Jia. Wuxia was unmoved. He turned his head and pretended to be dead. Don't think that it'll be fine if you just pretend to be dead. Xianxia put down the phone and picked up a cushion to hit him. How can you say such shameless things? Wuxia put down the newspaper and snatched the cushion from Xianxia's hands. He flipped over and easily pinned her down on the sofa. Leaning in close to her face, the man's lips curled into a smile as he breathed out, Madam, did I say something wrong? Besides the soul, the compatibility of the body is also very important. Wuxia spoke in a serious manner. She blushed in anger. Where did you learn such dirty jokes from? How can you come up with them so easily? This is the truth. Wuxia pecked her lips lightly and said meaningfully, I think that we don't have to interfere too much in the relationship between Gong Jia and Huajin. But, what are you worried about? Xianxia was a little distressed. I'm worried, you don't have to worry about that. Gong Jia will take care of it. Wuxia said intimately in her neck, now, you just need to take care of things between us. Huajin returned to the castle from the dining hall. He walked up the stairs to his room and pushed the door open, only to see Gong Jia occupying his big bed. Huajin was shocked. If he hadn't confirmed that this was his room, he would have thought that he was drunk and went to the wrong room. You're back. Why are you here? Gong Jia lay on his side. I'll sleep here tonight. This is my room. And then? If you want to sleep, go back to your room. I'll sleep here. Gong Jia said rudely, I'll sleep with you tonight. It seemed that Gong Jia really wanted to take Wuxia's advice as a reference. Huajin was completely petrified. What was this guy up to again? He gulped and turned around. Then I'll sleep in your room. Gong Jia said slowly, I promise you, you won't be able to walk out of this room. Huajin couldn't take it anymore and turned around. Tell me, what's your purpose? To sleep with you. It was an overbearing and rude answer. Full marks. Huajin almost had a heart attack from the shock. If he knew that this was Wuxia's idea to Gong Jia, he would be so angry that his face would change shape. I think that the progress between us is too slow. Gong Jia lay on the bed freely. Every word he said was enough to make Huajin shudder. I intend to speed up the progress between us. You must be crazy. Huajin walked to the bed and started to drive him away. Get up and go back to your room to sleep. However, he had neglected to keep a distance from Gong Jia. The next second, his arm was pulled and he was the one in control. Chapter 44-75. Huajin replied, I don't want to. Did this guy come here with the intention of eating him alive? Don't come so close to me. Huajin felt that his breathing had become erratic, and it was extremely chaotic. Why? It was quiet all around. Gong Jia could feel Huajin's heartbeat quickening. The two faces inched closer to each other. Huajin's heart was about to jump out of his throat. At this moment, the door was suddenly pushed open. Yu and Xiao Yichen barged in one after another. Huajin, bad news. Yu walked in and saw the scene on the bed. Gong Jia pinned Huajin under his body, looking like a tiger eyeing its prey. Huajin, on the other hand, looked over in horror. When he saw the two little lads rushing in, his face turned pale with fright. Yu and Xiao Yichen were dumbfounded. What the hell was going on? Uncle, why didn't you knock before coming in? Gong Jia raised his eyebrows in displeasure. Ah, it's like this. Yu recalled his original intention and hurriedly explained, Natalia, hearing that it was about Natalia, Gong Jia and Hua Jin became anxious. What's wrong with her? She's crying a lot. Hua Jin and Gong Jia rushed to Natalia's room and saw that Alice had arrived as well. The room was in a mess. Natalia was curled up in a corner, shivering. When she saw Hua Jin, Natalia cried and threw herself into his arms. You're not dead. That's great. That's great. I thought you were dead. Alice looked at the scene with mixed feelings. She had thought that Hua Jin's appearance in front of Natalia would trigger her memories of being imprisoned in the sanctuary. Therefore, she tried to persuade Hua Jin not to come and see her. However, Hua Jin did not appear for a long time. Natalia thought that Hua Jin was dead and that everyone had been hiding it from her. She had nightmares. She often dreamed that Hua Jin was lying on the bed, covered by a white cloth. He was no longer breathing. She was heartbroken and woke up crying. Seeing that he was still alive, Natalia broke down and cried. The worries and suspicions that had been plaguing him all this time had finally vanished. You're still alive. That's great. That day, Gong Jia carried Hua Jin on the boat. During the long critical period, Natalia overheard from Alice that Hua Jin's condition. She thought that Hua Jin was probably dead, so she had been suppressing it. The terrifying memories, coupled with the accumulated worries, finally crushed her. Hua Jin did not appear for so many days. Only Gong Jia and Yu accompanied her. She did not dare to ask about Hua Jin. She was afraid that she would get an answer she did not want. The nightmares that she had been suppressing and suspecting were the last straw that broke her back. Natalia broke down and smashed everything in the house. She felt that there was no reason for her to still be alive. During the days when she was imprisoned in the sanctuary, if it were not for Hua Jin and Alice taking care of her, she would not have been able to survive until now. Therefore, Natalia felt guilty and thought that she was the culprit behind Hua Jin's death. Now that she saw Hua Jin alive, Natalia thought that she was dreaming. Am I dreaming? Natalia held his face and sobbed. Is it real? Are you really still alive? Hua Jin did not know whether to laugh or cry, but he was also filled with emotions. Chapter 44-76. In the end, Natalia had been on tenterhooks all day. Apart from the trauma of the kidnapping, she was also worried about him. He had never imagined that he was so important to Natalia. Alice said to Hua Jin, "Stay with Natalia tonight. I can tell that she's worried about you. It's like she's lost her soul." Hua Jin nodded and turned to look at Gong Jia. "What about you?" "Me?" Gong Jia said, "I'll stay too." Alice said, "Okay, then," she said to Yu and Xiao Yichen, "Let's go." After the three of them walked out of the room and closed the door, Yu and Xiao Yichen had different expressions on their faces. Alice glanced at them. "What's wrong? You look weird." "Alice, let me tell you. Yu and I saw a ghost just now." Xiao Yichen walked up to Alice and said with a horrified expression, "When Yu and I entered Hua Jin's room just now, we saw Uncle on top of him." The position was indescribable. It seemed like Yu and Alice looked at each other. No one had mentioned to him that Hua Jin and Gong Jia had an ambiguous relationship. Obviously, Xiao Yichen was the last one to be kept in the dark. Obviously, he had not recovered from the shock of seeing Hua Jin and Gong Jia on the bed. Could it be? Xiao Yichen crossed his arms and said, "Uncle and Hua Jin were playing some kind of sumo game?" Yu was speechless. Alice said, "You can be more imaginative." "What else could it be?" Xiao Yichen looked at Yu. "Yu, what do you think?" "Uncle likes Hua Jin." No, that's impossible. Uncle has always been a straight man. How could he like men? That's just his way of doing things. It doesn't mean that it's a matter of sexual orientation. Besides, who said that men can only like women? Isn't it normal for men to fall in love with each other? Xiao Yichen said, "I think Uncle should like women." You know it again. Xiao Yichen, are you a god? Do you know everything? Yu poked his head and said, besides, what does it have to do with you whether uncle likes men or women? Xiao Yichen came to his senses and said, that's right. What does that have to do with me? However, you can't just make such wild guesses. It's not like we made a random guess. Yu and Alice said in unison, this is his own intention. What do you mean? The day before yesterday or the day before yesterday? I forgot, but Hua Jin seemed to have run over and said that uncle confessed to him. Pfft, Xiao Yichen almost vomited blood. Are you serious? Are you kidding me? It's definitely not a joke. Xiao Yichen was so shocked that his soul almost left his body. In the room, Natalia had taken a shower and eaten. The room had been cleaned up. Hua Jin coaxed her into bed and sat on either side of the bed with Gong Jia. He urged her, you haven't slept well these few days, right? Hurry up and go to sleep. Then, what about you? Natalia looked at Hua Jin and then at Gong Jia. Will you leave after I fall asleep? Hua Jin and Gong Jia looked at each other and shook their heads. Gong Jia said, we won't leave. We'll stay here with you. I don't believe you. Chapter 44-77. Natalia was afraid that they would leave quietly after she fell asleep, so she patted the bed. Lie down and sleep together. The bed was very big. It was 2 meters wide and 2 meters long. It was not small at all for the 3 of them to sleep on. Hua Jin knew what Natalia was worried about, so he lay down obediently. Gong Jia and Hua Jin lay on either side of her. Only then did Natalia feel much more at ease. Nestled in Gong Jia's arms, Natalia murmured, I miss home. She missed the home that only belonged to Gong Jia, Hua Jin, and her. This place was so unfamiliar. She was surrounded by bad memories. She could not sleep well. When you're better, we'll go back. I'm already well nourished. Natalia pouted. I want to go home. Okay, sleep first, okay? Hua Jin's ability to coax children was already top-notch. Natalia said, give me a good-night kiss. Hua Jin gently kissed her forehead. When Gong Jia saw this, he felt indignant. I want one too. Hua Jin was speechless. He thought coldly in his heart, are you a freaking child? You want a good-night kiss? Aren't you childish? Gong Jia also stared at him meaningfully and even moved his handsome face closer. He was obviously being shameless. Natalia was amused. Haha. Hua Jin was forced to do so, but he still satisfied him and kissed him lightly on the forehead. Gong Jia was still not satisfied. That's it? That's it. Sleep. Hua Jin blushed and lay down. He hugged Natalia and closed his eyes. Natalia fell asleep very quickly. Not long after, Hua Jin was also very sleepy and fell asleep very quickly. Gong Jia, however, could not fall asleep. He propped his upper body up and laid on his side. He held his head and quietly looked at the 2 people lying beside him. Hua Jin and Natalia slept in each other's arms. Both of them slept very quietly. Natalia's arm was placed on Hua Jin's chest. Under the moonlight, this scene was inexplicably heartwarming. The next day, when Hua Jin woke up, Gong Jia was sleeping soundly with Natalia in his arms. He walked to the window and pulled the curtains open. The long-awaited sunlight finally poured in. The whole room was much brighter. He left the room quietly, and when he went out, he unexpectedly met Alice. Hua Jin. I heard you and Xiao Yichen. Hua Jin, his heart felt stifled. And these 2 little brats. Don't listen to their nonsense. Actually, there's nothing wrong with admitting it. After a pause, Alice's expression became serious again. Today's news is out. It's about the sanctuary. As she spoke, Alice handed the tablet to Hua Jin. Hua Jin took the tablet. Many of the world's authoritative media outlets reported wantonly. The news of the sanctuary's mass suicide that night shook the world. Such a brutal mass suicide case was extremely rare. Undoubtedly, this explosive news lasted for a long time. At the same time, the war in East Africa officially began. The International Peacekeeping Organization of the United Nations had already begun to intervene. More than 1,000 believers voluntarily took hydrogen chloride and died within seconds. Chapter 4478. Alice said, "Hua Jin, the International Federation already knew that you were one of the survivors at the scene. Some reporters wanted to interview you, but they were all blocked. During this time, other than here, don't go anywhere else." "Why?" "I suspect that there are still believers left in the sacred hall. They might already be looking for your whereabouts, which is bad for you." Hua Jin, on the other hand, was baffled. "Why are those believers looking for my whereabouts? What does this have to do with me?" "Because you are the holy son chosen by the leader of the sacred hall. Those believers believe that as long as they complete the ritual, their leader will obtain eternal life." "That's ridiculous." Hua Jin finally couldn't help it. "I'm innocent. Those believers have been brainwashed. In their minds, Jim is God, and you are the holy son chosen by God. After completing the ritual, your will and spirit will make Jim's soul more indestructible, and those believers who follow him will also obtain eternal life." Hua Jin couldn't help but think about it in horror. "I suspect that those believers who pretended to take the medicine are not repentant or have thought it through, but stubborn evil cult members. They must be sparing no effort to track your whereabouts." Hua Jin nodded lightly. "Okay. You stay in Dark Wind Island, don't go anywhere for the time being." Alice said again, "Hurricane will send mercenaries to track down the whereabouts of those believers, eliminate them, and hand them over to the International Court for trial." "Those believers were not caught?" "No. Only one was caught. We only managed to capture one of them. The other 5 seem to have escaped and have disappeared without a trace." Hua Jin looked at the news displayed on the tablet with a heavy heart. Alice asked again, "What was the situation like that day? You haven't mentioned it to me. Why did Jim choose you to be the Holy Son?" Hua Jin heard this and couldn't help but sneer. "You think Jim created the so-called doctrine to save those believers? He only selfishly wanted to take the money and property of those believers. In other words, even he himself knew that there was no such thing as the Temple of Light, and there was no such thing as eternal life. It was just a crooked practice that he had instilled in his followers. He needed a reason and an excuse." It is said that Jim referenced the ancient burial system of Z country. Jim regarded the thousands of believers as his slaves. He believed that after death, the soul lived in another world. The tomb is the residence of the owner of the tomb in another world. Everything is handled according to the etiquette of death is like life, death is like life, death is like existence. After the slave owners and nobles died, they would bury their slaves with them so that they could be enslaved after death. Thousands of followers were willing to be buried with him. Even if they had souls after death, he was still the cult master with boundless glory. He's just treating a few thousand lives as child's play. Most of his followers are victims of war and bankrupt civilians. They just want to find a place to shelter them, and Jim instilled this belief in them in the name of the Temple of Light. As for him being chosen as the Holy Son, the so-called living sacrifice also came from the ceremony recorded in the Holy Sutra. Chapter 4479. Alice nodded. "I'll talk to Gong Jia about this later. Anyway, it's best that you don't go anywhere except Dark Wind Island for now." Hua Jin nodded. Alice suddenly looked at him strangely. Hua Jin touched his face. "What? Let me ask you, huh? How far have you progressed with Gong Jia?" Alice had a curious look on her face, as if she wanted to hear some gossip. Hua Jin said, "Why are you asking about this kind of gossip?" "Because I'm curious." Alice said anxiously. "I see that you like Gong Jia, so don't reject him." Hua Jin said righteously, "I'm a straight man, Xianxia. This has nothing to do with being a straight man, right? Gong Jia doesn't like men either. It's just that the person he likes is also a man." What's the conflict? Hua Jin was speechless. What she said made so much sense that he was speechless. After Gong Jia woke up, he coaxed Natalia to wash up and go to the dining room for breakfast. Alice, Hua Jin, Yu, and Xiao Yichen were sitting together for breakfast. When Hua Jin saw Gong Jia, he immediately stood up and walked away as if he was avoiding something. I'm full. With that, he walked away as if he was fleeing from a disaster. Gong Jia sat down in confusion and snorted. It's like he's hiding from a tiger. Alice took a bite of her sandwich and giggled. Doesn't such a guilty expression mean that he's interested in you? Gong Jia looked surprised. How did you know? Let me ask you. Alice suddenly glanced at Natalia, who was standing at the side, and then hinted at Yu with her eyes. If Yu and Xiao Yichen couldn't tell, they would be fools. Hence, Yu held Natalia's hand and said, Natalia, what do you want to eat? Ham sandwich. The three little buns ran away. Alice held her spoon and narrowed her eyes. She asked mysteriously, did you kiss her? Yes, Gong Jia was shy. Although he didn't blush, there was a hint of hesitation in his tone. Did he resist? He struggled a lot. Then, did you show that disgusted expression? No. That means that Hua Jin has feelings for you. Alice was so excited that she put down her sandwich. No, it's very emotional. Why do you say that? Obviously, Gong Jia didn't think so. He even felt that Hua Jin should be very resistant to him. Alice smiled and said meaningfully, I'll teach you. You can do an experiment. Alice glanced at Zax, who was sitting not far away and eating breakfast. She said to him, touch Zax's head the same way you touched Hua Jin's head. You'll know by looking at Zax's reaction. If Hua Jin doesn't have any feelings for you, then... After 2 minutes of mental preparation, Gong Jia walked to Zax and sat down. Zax was the mercenary instructor of the Hurricane Group. He was 28 years old, young, and handsome. However, he was an upright and outspoken man. He was an extremely flirtatious man. Chapter 4480. Little Jia. Gong Jia called him affectionately. Little Jia was how Zax's girlfriend had always addressed him. Zax's face was instantly filled with horror, as though he had seen a ghost. He endured the nausea and asked blankly, Young Master Jia, what's wrong? Nothing. Gong Jia rested his chin on his hand and gazed deeply at him. I just want to quietly watch you eat breakfast. I feel that you look so good even when you're munching on a hamburger. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, Zax could clearly feel the goosebumps all over his body breaking out. He felt that his scalp was clearly tightening. This Gong Jia, what was going on? Why was he staring at him with such a strange gaze for no reason? Could it be that after returning from East Africa, he had been influenced by those evil sects and had gone mad? Zax swallowed hard. You have a fever? Do I? Zax was still worried. He reached out his hand and gently placed it on his forehead. In the next second, Gong Jia gently covered the back of his hand. His seemingly unintentional action made Zax shiver all over. He was on guard and looked at him as though he was looking at a pervert. Are you really a Gong Jia? He suspected that the person in front of him was a demon in Gong Jia's skin. Zax slapped his hand away. What are you doing? Gong Jia raised his eyebrows. It was just a habitual action, but it made Zax's shoulders tremble slightly. Perhaps Gong Jia's image in Hurricane was too serious and unsmiling. Moreover, when Zax was still a mercenary, he had been ravaged by Gong Jia too much. Even if he raised his eyebrows, he would still give off a sense of authority. It was different. Zax's reaction was obviously different from Hua Jin's. Gong Jia stood up and rubbed Zax's head. Zax was obviously repulsed by such contact. He shrunk his shoulders and glared at him resentfully, but he didn't dare to say anything. Ha ha ha. Gong Jia couldn't take it anymore. Zax couldn't take it anymore. He gathered his courage and stood up. Young Master Jia, are you crazy? He turned his head and looked at Alice. With an aggrieved expression, he said, Alice, is he sick? Treat him properly. Ha 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 ha. Alice laughed until she bent over the table. Oh my God. Gong Jia really went to experiment. Zax was suffering. He was being teased like this, but he didn't dare to say anything. I just wanted to see the reaction of a straight man. Please, I'm a man. Any normal man would definitely be creeped out if another man touched his head and hands like that, okay? Zax patted his chest lightly. I thought you were King possessed. When the Gong Jia returned to his seat, Alice snapped her fingers with a smug look on her face. I was right, wasn't I? You see, any normal man would definitely be very repulsed. Hua Jin is also very against it. Actually, it's not that he can't accept you, but that he can't accept himself. Why? Don't you think that in front of you, he always has an inexplicable sense of inferiority? Alice said quietly, Gong Jia, you're too dazzling. You're so dazzling that no one dares to brag about themselves and get close to you. If the sun was too strong, it would burn people. If there were too many outstanding people, the light they emitted would pierce through people's bodies until they were covered in cuts and bruises. Chapter 4481. Dazzling? Gong Jia was baffled. Why would he think that I'm too dazzling? It's not just him. Even I think that you're dazzling. Hua Jin probably subconsciously thinks that you're too outstanding. He doesn't want to touch you. Gong Jia could not help but laugh when he heard that. Is that so? I think it has something to do with his past. Alice said, I always feel that he has something on his mind. All along, Hua Jin gave me the feeling that he's carrying a heavy burden. He wants to let it go, but he can't. Gong Jia, if you really like him, even if he's incomplete and flawed, you'll still like him. But Hua Jin is different. He might feel that he's not good enough for you, so he subconsciously resists, and keeps a distance from you. Gong Jia's eyes darkened when he heard that. In the afternoon, Hua Jin stayed in his room, bored to death. Yu knocked on the door and pushed it open. When he saw Hua Jin lying on the sofa, he couldn't help but joke, Uncle Hua Jin, you look like a stranded salted fish. Hua Jin turned his head and looked at him bitterly. Have you seen such a beautiful salted fish? Why are you alone in the room? Sunbathing. Salted fish will dry up if they stay in the sun for too long. I'm not a salted fish. Yu urged, why don't we play cards? I don't feel like playing cards. Let's play cards. Alice taught us a new game. What game? Yu pulled out 2 decks of poker cards from nowhere. Poker. Balls originated from JS province. It was a poker game that was widely spread in the country. It evolved from the local poker games, Run Fast, and 80 points. The game was played in pairs of 4, and the winner would level up. Make the game more entertaining and exciting. 2 people in a team would compete against each other. Whoever finished first would be the leader, and the last to finish would be the last. If a team had 1 player in the first and 1 player in the second, they would be able to level up by 3 levels. The most interesting part of this game was leveling up and getting a straight flush. There were many ways to play it, and it tested one's brain power and logical thinking. Hua Jin could not stop Yu and was dragged to the chess room. Originally, Dark Wind Island didn't have a chess room, but after learning how to play cards from Yun Shusher's family, Gong Jia felt that poker games were very interesting, so he built a few chess rooms in the stadium. Mahjong tables, poker tables, everything was available. When they arrived at the chess room, they realized that Gong Jia and Natalia were there as well. Alice was teaching Natalia how to play cards. Originally, there were 4 people, Alice, Gong Jia, Hua Jin, and Yu. Xiao Yichen was not very good at poker games, so he politely declined. Natalia learned how to play, and she wanted to play as well. Therefore, Alice said that she didn't want to play anymore, and she wanted to be Natalia's strategist. The teams were divided into groups, and the 4 black and red cards were used to draw teammates. For some reason, Hua Jin was assigned to the same group as Gong Jia. It was unknown if it was a tacit understanding or something else. Hua Jin probed, "There's no punishment in this game, right?" "There is." Alice said, "Truth or dare?" Again. Hua Jin stood up and wanted to leave. Chapter 4482. Alice blocked the door. "Since you're here, don't even think about leaving. It's fine if you don't want to play the punishment game, but we'll pay for it." Yu and Gong Jia placed their bank cards on the table. Gong Jia's was a centurion black gold card. Hua Jin's eyes widened. "How much?" 1 million per round. Yu raised one finger. "Well, I'll pay for Natalia's share." Gong Jia looked at Hua Jin. Hua Jin gulped, took out his wallet, and placed a few bank cards on the table. "So much?" "No. He was poor. Although he was considered rich compared to the average person, he was not as rich as Gong Jia and Yu. Moreover, 1 million per round was too much for him. Hua Jin really wanted to retreat. After understanding the game, Hua Jin still did not fully understand it. He looked at Gong Jia expectantly. At this moment, it seemed like he was the only one he could rely on. "Gong Jia, I'm counting on you." "Humph. It's fine, 1 million per round is nothing." Yu added, "Yeah, if it weren't for you, we would have doubled the bombs." "Doubled the bombs? That would be at least tens of millions. Must it be so King tragic? There are winners and losers." With that, Yu looked at Gong Jia evilly. "Uncle, let's fight to the death today." Alice took out her credit card machine and stood at the side, looking like she was watching a show. No wonder she didn't want to participate. Damn it, if 4 bombs were dropped, it would be close to 10 million. Although 10 million wasn't a huge amount to Gong Jia and Yu, to him, it was practically bankrupt. This wasn't a game of cards, this was a game of life and death. The game started, and Gong Jia made the first move. Hua Jin was still sorting out the cards when he saw Gong Jia and Yu, who were on his left, doing the paperwork at lightning speed. In just a short while, they were done shuffling the cards. Hua Jin sorted out his cards and looked at them. There were a total of 4 singles in his hand. Gong Jia made the first move, and he made a single 3. Hua Jin was delighted and eager to try. Alas, Yu suddenly played a trump card. Hua Jin's hand, which was holding the single card, trembled. So ruthless right from the start. Yu was sitting on top of Hua Jin and had a strong hand in the cards, while Gong Jia was sitting on top of Yu and had a strong hand in the cards. It was as if the two were having a battle. 4 8s. 5 2s, 3 4 5 6 7 straights, a straight flush. 10 JH. After 3 to 4 rounds, Hua Jin didn't have a chance to make a single move. He was silently calculating in his heart. A single move was worth 1 million, and if he made a double move, then there would be a total of 5 moves. Rounding it up, it would be 16 million. He was about to faint. Hua Jin couldn't get up from the setback. He suddenly raised his hand and interrupted, "Let me ask you a question. If it's 1 million, is it RMB?" Yu reminded him coldly, "I only have 5 cards left." Hua Jin was so flustered that he wanted to cry but had no tears. 16 million. This King invisible psychological pressure was making him so flustered that he didn't know where to go. Yu looked at him, who was breaking out in cold sweat. She was slightly speechless. "What happened to you?" Chapter 4483. Is 1 million a lot? Alice hugged the card machine and was a little confused. "When I was in Las Vegas, I saw a lot of rich people throw their money around. Their wins and losses were in the millions or tens of millions. Some even spent hundreds of millions." Hua Jin resisted the urge to explode. "Come on, I said it myself. I'm rich. I'm not rich. I'm just a semi-retired person from the entertainment industry. Hua Jin finally caught Yu's cards. Alice stood behind Natalia and taught her how to play. Shameless. Hua Jin said angrily, it's a 2-on-2, but now it's a 2-on-3. Natalia doesn't know how to play. That won't do. Alice muttered a few words. Gong Jia said, don't worry, I won. Gong Jia threw away all the cards in his hand. I won. It was a straight. Gong Jia had the upper hand. Hua Jin's eyes lit up slightly. He lost and felt that the millions were back in his pocket. Gong Jia looked at his relieved expression and did not know whether to laugh or cry. Yu could only pass the card to Alice. Alice was in charge of swiping the card. With a beep, millions were transferred from the account. Is this really Dark Wind Island? This is AF * King upgraded version of Las Vegas. Hua Jin did not like gambling because he knew that gambling was a game where you only lost and never won. No matter how good you were or how lucky you were, you could not win forever. However, as he gradually adapted to the rules of the game, his coordination with Gong Jia gradually improved, and they made great strides in the game. Unexpectedly, Yu's card luck also became smoother and he slowly caught up. Most importantly, Yu did not have as much psychological pressure as Hua Jin did. Moreover, not only was his card luck good, but his logical thinking was unbelievable. There were many times when Yu would change the cards that he was sure to lose and he would win with different tricks. This child is so young and his card skills are so amazing. What will happen when he grows up? Slowly, Yu overtook him. For the entire afternoon, Hua Jin was in a state of fear. He had tried his best, but in the end, he lost a few million. Therefore, when the game ended, Hua Jin sat on the chair dejectedly as if his soul had been sucked out. Natalia and Yu looked at Hua Jin. Gong Jia could not help but laugh. Yu oh. Yu, Hua Jin wanted to cry. I'm not as rich as you. A few million, that's all I have. He had been dragged into this by Yu. In an instant, he had lost all his assets. Hua Jin wanted to jump into the sea. After winning the money, Yu felt refreshed. He said that he wanted to treat Alice to a drink and left with Natalia. Gong Jia stood up and walked over to Hua Jin. He gave him a little push. The next second, Hua Jin slumped on the table. Hongmen banquet, he let out a bitter sigh. Gong Jia said disapprovingly, you only lost a few million. I'll pay for what you lost. Chapter 4484. How can this be counted as yours? Since you've lost, there's no reason for you to foot the bill. The moment he raised his head, he met Gong Jia's deep gaze. He looked at him quietly, as if he wanted to dig out some treasure from his eyes. Only then did he realize that at this moment, only the two of them were left in the chess room. He couldn't help feeling a little awkward. The atmosphere was silent. When he woke up in the morning, he saw Gong Jia lying beside him, even though Natalia was in between them. When he thought of what had happened the night before, he ran out of the room as if he was fleeing. He didn't know what he was running away from. It was almost instinctive. Hua Jin felt a little guilty. Why are you staring at me? I'm going on a long trip. I'll be away for a while. Hua Jin looked puzzled. Why? Where are you going? I'm going to settle some matters. Is it dangerous? Gong Jia furrowed his brows slightly. There's a certain risk in saying it's dangerous, but there's no other way. This matter has to be settled. Do you have to go personally? Hua Jin was a little worried. If it's so dangerous, can't you leave it to someone else? Gong Jia's eyes flickered with a sharp glint. Why? You're worried about me? No. I'm just concerned as a friend. When Gong Jia heard this, he knew that it wasn't out of concern as a friend, but out of awkwardness. However, when he saw Hua Jin's worried expression, he suddenly felt a little better. So what if it's dangerous? Gong Jia crossed his arms and leaned lightly on the table. If I don't come back, won't you be more relaxed? Relaxed? Why should I feel relaxed? Otherwise, I can see that you're not relaxed now. It's as if you're guarding against me. What are you talking about? If you don't come back, everyone will be very sad. Especially Xianxia, she'll definitely break down. Everyone will be sad. Gong Jia suddenly lowered his head and leaned closer to him. Then may I ask, does this include you? Hua Jin was once again at a loss for words. Enough. Gong Jia ruffled his hair. I won't bully you anymore. This fellow also knew that he was bullying him. Hua Jin didn't know what to say for a moment. It seemed that the two of them were at a complicated watershed, a bottleneck. They wanted to break through, but they couldn't help but want to retreat. It seemed that they were stuck there. Just as Gong Jia was about to leave, Hua Jin mustered up the courage to stand up and say to him, Gong Jia, if it's really dangerous, don't go. Gong Jia looked at him with an inscrutable expression. Hua Jin looked at him and walked over. What's the matter? Is it convenient for you to tell me? Gong Jia suddenly reached out and pulled him in front of him. You're still saying that you don't care about me? Hua Jin, is it really that difficult for you to admit that you care about me? Hua Jin's body stiffened. He looked at his feet and felt that he was sinking deeper and deeper into a quagmire. He didn't dare to look at Gong Jia. That pair of eyes was like a deep abyss. With one look, he felt as if he had fallen into it and couldn't extricate himself. Chapter 4485. Gong Jia was about to leave when Hua Jin mustered up the courage to stand up and say to him, Gong Jia, if it's really dangerous, don't go. Gong Jia turned to look at him with an unreadable expression. Hua Jin looked at him and walked over. What's the matter? Is it convenient for you to say? Gong Jia suddenly reached out and pulled him in front of him. You're still saying that you're not concerned? Hua Jin, is it really that difficult for you to admit that you care about me? Hua Jin's body stiffened. He felt like he was sinking deeper and deeper into a quagmire. He didn't dare to look at Gong Jia. Those eyes were eyes, but they were more like a deep abyss. With one look, he felt like he was falling into it and couldn't extricate himself. Hua Jin closed his eyes and finally said, Okay, I admit that I'm worried about you. Since you said that it's very dangerous, I don't want you to go. His words were as plain as water, but it made Gong Jia's heartbeat accelerate. How many years had it been, other than reuniting with Yun Xianxia and Yueyao's birth, even when he was trapped in East Africa, there was absolutely nothing that could disturb his mind. But he was like a surprise that appeared out of nowhere. Gong Jia was in a daze when Hua Jin suddenly grabbed his shirt sleeve. If I tell you not to go, will you not go? Hua Jin was really worried. Gong Jia smiled. You don't have confidence in me? No, yeah, I have to go. Gong Jia said again, stay here obediently and wait for me. Hua Jin pursed his lips and didn't say anything else. There was a moment of uneasiness. He suddenly realized that Gong Jia's departure this time seemed to have something to do with him. Gong Jia saw the undisguised worry on his face. For a moment, he was in a good mood. He bowed slightly and used his unique height advantage to force him to a corner. Do you know how much I like your expression right now? Gong Jia, who had always been arrogant and cold and cherished his words like gold, actually said such words. Hua Jin felt very dizzy. I don't understand what you mean by that. The next second, before Hua Jin could finish speaking, Gong Jia suddenly bent down and kissed him gently on the lips. Gong Jia couldn't help but ask for more. That boiling hot breath seemed to corrode his rationality bit by bit. Hua Jin stood rooted to the ground in a daze, neither refusing nor replying. Gong Jia grabbed his arm and wrapped it around his waist. With this, there was no longer any barrier between the two. He hugged Hua Jin domineeringly and nibbled on his beautiful neck and shoulders, so fragrant. The fragrance on his body was refreshing. Gong Jia realized that he was using the same scent as him. It was as if the scent of both of them had merged together. He couldn't tell which was his and which was his. He liked this feeling. Hua Jin, on the other hand, was so flustered that he forgot to reject the man's kiss. Gong Jie's kiss actually made him a little infatuated. All this time, no matter who he was in front of, he had always been careful to protect himself. He didn't expect that such a man would barge into his world unscrupulously and stir up a storm of blood. Hua Jin's breathing gradually became hurried. In a daze, he suddenly heard Gong Jie say, "I will come back safe and sound. Because this body, in the future, will be yours." Chapter 4486. When Gong Jie let go of him, if he wasn't leaning against the wall, Hua Jin's body would have slid to the ground. Gong Jie rubbed the boy's head lovingly and left. When Hua Jin came back to his senses and chased after him, he was already gone. At night, Hua Jin hesitated again and again. In the end, he went to find Alice and asked directly. Gong Jie said that he has something to do and needs to go on a long trip. What did he tell you? Hua Jin suddenly became excited. What's going on? You must know. Alice looked at him as if he was an idiot. What do you think? I've known Gong Jie for so long, but I've never seen him so concerned about anyone. Because of my matter? Hua Jin was even more shocked. Do you think? I remember I told you that the remnants of the sacred palace haven't been completely eliminated. They're looking for you. Gong Jie received an invitation from the International Federation. Those remnants naturally have to be eliminated. Leaving them in this world is a disaster. So, was it really because of his matter? Was Gong Jie protecting him? Then, why didn't he tell him about it? Those believers are all terrorists. Hua Jin became agitated. How cruel are their methods? Won't it be dangerous for Gong Jie to go? You underestimate Gong Jie too much. Besides, there are so many people protecting him. Don't worry, he'll be fine. Even if he's fine, Hua Jin clenched his fists. What if he gets hurt? You care about him so much. I couldn't tell. I think you two have a good relationship. You think too much. Hua Jin said righteously, I just don't want him to get hurt because of my matter. You're speaking so confidently. Isn't your problem his problem? Moreover, the grudge between Hurricane and the Sacred Palace has been formed. Apart from you, he also has his own temper. In East Africa, several of his beloved subordinates died so tragically because of the Sacred Hall. He will definitely go there to take revenge. Hua Jin sat on the sofa in silence. He suddenly raised his head and asked, Can I go with him? Forget it. If you go, you'll just be sending yourself to death. Alice spat out a sentence that choked him to death. Hua Jin said angrily, In East Africa, I also put in a lot of effort and didn't drag you down. In East Africa. If it weren't for you, Shao Jia wouldn't have almost died there. Hua Jin felt so guilty that he didn't say anything. Actually, I've always felt that Shao Jia's feelings for you were a little special. I didn't think too much about it at first, and I'm sure he didn't think too much about it either. However, during his time in East Africa, perhaps because he had experienced too many calamities, he immediately recognized his feelings. You know, there are often many things that can only be figured out when one is on the brink of death. Hua Jin said, Is this the worst time he's ever offended someone? This is definitely not the worst time he's ever had. There was once when Gong Jie almost got pregnant. However, this time, the situation is different from the past. How is it different? Huh? Alice looked at Hua Jin as if she was looking at a hopeless idiot. Don't you understand? This time, you almost died. You were unconscious on the ship for so long and had a high fever when you came back. You don't know that when you were unconscious, Gong Jie thought that you wouldn't make it. You didn't eat or drink for a few days. Wasn't he the same? Chapter 4487. For many things, the closer you are to life and death, the easier it is for you to think things through. He really thought that he was going to lose you. Lying in bed, Hua Jin replayed Alice's words over and over in his mind. If it were not for her, he would not have known that he was so important to Gong Jie. Why? He could not figure out why someone as outstanding as Gong Jie would like him. Alice could not help but laugh when she heard that. Like is too abstract. Take me as an example. The first time I saw Gong Jia, I inexplicably fell in love with him. I can't remember what I really liked about him. But I vaguely remember that I was deeply infatuated with his youthful frivolity and high-spirited spirit. She liked him. Even if it was just a glance. She did not understand why she would become crazy once she fell in love with others, even though she was very rational when it came to love. When Gong Jia was infected with the amyla virus, liked him. In order to save him, I did not hesitate to use myself as a test subject. I could not believe that there would be such a day where I would be so cruel to myself and use myself as a test subject. At that time, I actually did not have any expectations. I even thought that if the experiment failed, at least he would not be lonely with me by his side. But I never thought that because of my sacrifice, I would want him to repay me. If he liked me, so be it. Until I found out that the person he liked was you, I had no complaints. Alice laughed evilly as she said, at least I would feel better in my heart. Otherwise, I would be very sad. In Alice's room, she took out many photos of Gong Jia when he was young. When she was helping Gong Jia to tidy up his room, she felt that the photos of Gong Jia when he was young were especially cute and interesting. Hence, she secretly hid the photos for herself. Usually, she could not bear to take them out. She took out the photos and showed them to Huajin. In the photos, most of them were photos of Gong Jia when he was young. Alice sighed with emotion as she showed Huajin the signboard. Xiao Jia really likes you a lot. There was an unspeakable envy in her tone. I've never seen him smile at anyone like that. Huajin flipped through the photos one by one. In the photos, whether it was when he was young or after he grew up, Gong Jia always had a cold and unsmiling face when facing the camera. He seemed to really hate smiling. There was a picture of the Gong family in uniform. Everyone was wearing the uniform of the Gong family's private navy. Gong Jia was standing in the middle of the last row. His gaze was terrifyingly gloomy. It was hard to imagine that the young man in the picture was actually Gong Jia in his youth. Looks like the murderous aura is very strong. His murderous aura is indeed very strong. I've always thought that Gong Jia was a very heartless and cold-blooded person. I remember there's a saying that if a person's murderous aura is very strong, then his life would be very tough. Even the king of hell would not dare to take him. We all laughed that Xiao Jia would definitely live a long life, haha. Alice laughed and let out a long sigh of relief. However, Xiao Jia has really changed a lot now. Other than Shishir, you've changed him a lot too. Huajin sighed. Me? What have I done to deserve it? Chapter 4488. When he returned to his room, Huajin was still absent-minded. He lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. His heart gradually calmed down. He closed his eyes and stopped thinking so much. The next day, when Huajin woke up, Alice told him that Gong Jia had left at dawn. Huajin was a little absent-minded. He didn't know why, but he had an ominous premonition. It was Gong Jia's order to arrange for Huajin and Natalia to stay on Dark Wind Island. After all, Huajin was facing many threats at that time. Gong Jia couldn't let him go as long as the remnants of the Sacred Hall were not eliminated. He didn't want to be kidnapped again. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen took a private jet back to China. Because Yue Yao had a fever on the eve of his birthday. The two of them had stayed on Dark Wind Island for a long time. Yu Yu's condition had stabilized. They missed Yue Yao very much. Since it was Yue Yao's birthday, the two of them had decided to go back early. They didn't expect Yue Yao to have a fever. Yue Yao was 4 years old. It wasn't a small matter for a child at this age to have a fever. Yun Shishir was very nervous. The family doctor said that it was best to do a comprehensive checkup. It was safer to go to the hospital. Many children at this age contracted pneumonia because the doctor didn't do a comprehensive checkup. Therefore, she nervously carried the child to the hospital. In the hospital, Yue Yao had a fever of 39 degrees Celsius. It was said that the fever alternated between warm and cold. When Yueyao fell asleep at night, he liked to kick the blanket because of the heat. When it was late at night, the temperature turned cold and he caught a cold. Once a child caught a cold, his fever rose quickly. The doctor suggested that he stay in the hospital for observation. During the observation period, Yueyao's condition gradually stabilized. Then, Yin Shishir was surprised to find that she met a child in the hospital. Jingyang. Yin Shishir had a deep impression of this child. The first time she saw this child was when she and Gu Xingzi had an accident. She lost her sight and Gu Xingzi donated his corneas to another child, Jingyang. At that time, her eyes had not recovered, so she did not see what the child looked like. However, even though she couldn't see, she had held the child before. Coincidentally, he met Jingyang this time because Jingyang had caught a cold and had a fever, just like Yueyao. The two children stayed in the same ward and on the same floor. Yin Shishir happened to see Jingyang when she was fetching water for Yueyao. He had just finished his 4-drip, and the lively little guy was clamoring to get out of bed for a walk. When he passed by Yueyao's ward, he heard Yueyao crying because she was taking his temperature. The little fellow curiously went to the door and bumped into Yin Shishir, who was about to get hot water. The little bun bumped into her leg. Yin Shishir did not know who he was, but she was attracted by the little fellow's handsome face at first sight. He was really cute. He had a pair of big watery eyes, and the pupils were amber. They were mesmerizing, and his long eyelashes were thick and curly. He was very cute. His skin was fairer than the average girl's, and his lips were pink. They were not too rosy, but they were not too pale either. The shape of his lips was unusually good-looking, like jelly. Chapter 4489. When he saw Yin Shishir, the little guy took half a step back timidly. He was obviously a little shy and afraid. There was still a fever patch on his forehead. So it was also because of a fever? Yin Shishir squatted down and asked him his name. However, the little guy was very vigilant. He shook his head and intertwined his hands. Obviously, he was unwilling to say and was very vigilant. Beside him, the little bun's mother rushed over. When she saw that her son had rushed to the door of someone else's ward, she quickly rushed over and bowed to Yin Shishir to apologize. However, when she recognized that it was Yin Shishir, her eyes widened in disbelief. It's you," Yin Shishir was a little surprised. "Me? Do you know me?" She was not too curious. That was because too many people knew her. However, this woman's surprise did not seem like she had seen a superstar, but an old friend. "Yin Shishir, is that you?" The woman picked up the little bun and smiled as she held the little bun's hand. She waved at her. "Come, Yang Yang, say hello to Auntie." Seeing that his mother seemed to know this auntie, the little bun opened his mouth and called out in a childish voice, "Auntie, Miss Yun, it's me. This is my son. His name is Jingyang. Do you still remember him?" "Ah," Yin Shishir let out a short "ah." In an instant, her gaze landed on Jingyang again, but her eyes were already red with emotion. This child was the child who received Xingjia's cornea donation. When Yang Yang was born, he was the same as other children, but as he gradually grew up, other children began to look at the world curiously. However, he lay in the crib, motionless, and didn't know how to fool around. I teased him with toys, but he didn't have any reaction. Although his eyes were wide open, they weren't focused. Jing Qi sat on the bed and chatted with Yin Shishir. Beside her, Jing Yang was lying beside Yueyao's bed. He held his little head and curiously sized up the little girl who was about the same age as him. He stared at her curiously and carefully reached out to poke her face from time to time. Yueyao had just had a fever injection and was already asleep. Yin Shishir was listening attentively. Jing Qi continued, "He was always lying still. I was afraid that something would happen to the child. I sent him to the hospital and found out that the child had a congenital cornea defect. The doctor said that it might be because I didn't get enough nutrition when I was pregnant, but he couldn't rule out other reasons. In any case, the child was born with a problem with his eyes. When I found out about this, I was so worried that I couldn't sleep well for a few nights. The child's surgery fees are a problem, not to mention the scarce source of cornea donors. Yin Shishir looked at Jing Yang and felt pity for him. Perhaps it was love for the house, love its crow. For the past few years, she had been missing Gu Xingzi. In this child, she seemed to see the continuation of Gu Xingzi's life. Thank you very much. If it wasn't for Mr. Gu Xingzi, I wouldn't know what to do. I also thought of donating my own cornea to him, but the doctor said that the hospital doesn't have the right to perform such a surgery. I like this child. Not only is this child beautiful, but he gives me a sense of familiarity. Chapter 4490. The person had passed away, and the living were like this. Jing Qi lowered her head, feeling a little sad. She suddenly said, "Actually, I didn't know about Gu Xingzi before, but after that, I went to watch many of his movies, including The Green Apple, that you guys filmed together." After a pause, Jing Qi didn't know if she should mention this. "I think Mr. Gu Xingzi likes you very much, right?" "You?" Yin Shishir looked at her in surprise. "I'm sorry," Jing Qi lowered her head guiltily. "Actually, I know that with my identity, I shouldn't mention this. However, the movie The Green Apple, especially, made me cry. It's too touching. We're clearly in love, but we have to be in so much pain. I've watched this movie several times. Moreover, from this movie, I can tell that the way Mr. Gu Xingzi looks at you is from the bottom of his heart. It's not an act." Yin Shishir suddenly fell silent. Jing Qi continued, "I'm very sad about Mr. Gu Xingzi's accident, but I also hope that you can let him go. I think that if there's a next life, perhaps the two of you will meet again at a certain street corner. Look, fate is really a magical thing. We actually met here again and even stayed in the ward next door. Don't you think this is a magical thing?" Yin Shishir heard this and agreed. She suddenly asked curiously, "I've never seen your husband. Where's Yang father?" When Jing Qi heard this, she suddenly lowered her eyelashes sadly, her eyes filled with disappointment. "His father, what's wrong?" Yin Shishir saw her melancholic expression and became uneasy. "Did something happen? Just tell me. If I can help you, I'll do my best." "Thank you, Shishir. But, actually, I didn't mention the child's father to you last time because I'm actually not married yet." "Not married?" Yin Shishir's heart skipped a beat. She inexplicably saw herself in this lonely and stubborn woman. 5 years ago, I fell in love with a man and wanted to be with him without hesitation. But now, it seems that I'm like a moth flying into a flame. Until the child was born, he had no intention of marrying me. Only then did I realize that the man I foolishly loved didn't love me. When father and mother found out that I had a child out of wedlock, they were furious and wanted me to sell the child." As Jing Qi spoke, her eyes were slightly moist. "Speaking of which, I'm ashamed. Back then, I did have such an idea. Originally, when the child was born, I had the idea of marrying that man. However, when I realized that the man wouldn't marry me, the child was also diagnosed with a cornea defect. My mother convinced me that since that man didn't want me, it would be difficult for me to remarry with a child. You know, many men are very concerned about a woman's past. I thought that even if the child had the opportunity to undergo surgery, the medical fees were not something I could afford. I was thinking that I might as well entrust the child to a good family. Perhaps, he might be able to live a happier life." Chapter 4491. You have to know that this child hasn't cried much since he was born. He cried so hard that even my mother was scared. I believed that this was a telepathic connection between him and me. When we reached the door of that family, I immediately regretted it. I knelt in front of my mother with the child in my arms and begged bitterly. My mother's heart softened, so she didn't take that wrong step. Yin Shishir asked worriedly, later, "Did your parents accept this child?" Jing Qi sighed and shook her head. "No, my father didn't accept it in the end. He even threatened to cut off our father-daughter relationship." My mother's heart ached for me. Although she didn't agree with my actions and felt that this child would delay my life, she would occasionally sneak a few glances at me and the child behind my father's back. Yang is very sensible, obedient, and she likes him very much. My mother likes this child now. As she said this, Jing Qi looked at Jing Yang with eyes full of love. By the bed, Jing Yang was gently fiddling with Yueyao's long eyelashes with his small hands. Yueyao was sleeping peacefully. When Jing Qi saw him, she immediately stopped him in a low voice. Yang, don't touch, Mom. Her eyebrows are so beautiful. Jing Yang turned his head, his eyes bright as if there were many little stars. They're just like dolls. So cute. Little fool, those are eyelashes, not eyebrows. Oh. Eyelashes. Jing Yang muttered eyelashes silently. He was so young that he couldn't even distinguish eyelashes from eyebrows. Don't touch your sister. She's sick, understand? Yun Shishir smiled and said, it's okay. When Jing Yang heard this, he replied with an oh. He turned his head and looked at Yueyao, his heart full of love. So cute. She was even cuter than a doll. This little sister was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. Jing Qi said to Jing Yang, let's go back to our room and take your medicine obediently. Then, take an afternoon nap, okay? In the past, Jing Yang would definitely listen to her words. But now, he didn't say a word. He lowered his head and pouted. It was obvious that he was unwilling. Jing Qi was surprised. Was this little guy throwing a tantrum? Jing Yang was now in kindergarten. Because of his handsome and cute appearance, he was very popular with the girls in the class. However, he liked to play with boys. Even if there were so many girls chasing after him to play with him, he would ignore them all. Although Jing Yang was well behaved in front of her, he was actually very naughty when he was with the other boys in the class. It was also from the class teacher that he found out that many girls in the class were jealous of him. Jing Qi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At such a young age, she already knows how to be jealous. However, Jing Yang, who never liked to play with girls, was unwilling to go back to the ward because of the Yueyao. Jing Qi seemed to have seen through his thoughts. Do you think your sister is very cute and want to stay and accompany her? Yes. What's her name? Yun Shishir also squatted down and looked at him at eye level. She looked at him and said, her name is Yueyao, Mu Yueyao. Yueyao. Jing Yang seriously and methodically learned to speak. Finally, he said Yueyao's name very clearly. She's sick. Jing Yang lay by the bed and looked, obviously unwilling to leave. Chapter 4492. When Yun Shishir saw this, she said to Jing Qi, since he likes to be with Yueyao, let him stay. When Jing Qi heard this, she said cautiously, will it cause you trouble? How can that be? I can't even wait to like him. Yun Shishir and Jing Qi chatted idly. At first, Jing Qi was still a little nervous. After all, Yun Shishir was a public figure and a big star. She was afraid that she had said something wrong. But later on, Yun Shishir gave her an extremely amiable feeling, and she gradually opened her mouth. The women sat together and talked about nothing more than the children's problems. As they chatted, Jing Yang let out a surprised sound. Wow! Yueyao is awake. Yun Shishir and Jing Qi turned their heads in unison and saw Yueyao slowly opening her eyes. The moment she opened her eyes, they seemed to emit a dazzling light like diamonds. Jing Yang, who was lying at the side, actually suffocated. So beautiful. Jing Yang had originally stayed by Yu Yao's side out of curiosity. He saw that her face was red from fever and her eyelashes were long. Even though her eyes were closed, it wasn't hard to imagine how adorable she was. However, when Yueyao opened her eyes, Jing Yang felt that his breathing was almost stagnant. He was afraid that his breath would accidentally wrinkle such a beautiful face. Jing Qi saw that Jing Yang's face was actually red and found it strange. Yang, why is your face red? Jing Yang heard this but did not say anything. Yun Shishir also saw his red face. Yu Yao opened her eyes. They flickered softly like the fluttering wings of a butterfly. She turned to look at Yun Shishir and pouted. Mommy. Yue Yao hurts. Where does it hurt? Head. Yue Yao's speech was not very smooth. She was slurring her words, but they sounded extremely cute. When Jing Qi heard this, she immediately urged Jing Yang to say, Yang, sister says she has a headache. Do you want to rub it for her? Can I? Of course. Jing Yang timidly stretched out his small hand. Yue Yao then saw an unfamiliar boy lying on the bed. She was a little scared and pulled up the quilt to cover half of her small face. She only used a pair of eyes to secretly size him up. Jing Yang's face turned even redder. However, he refused to retract his hand. Instead, he leaned forward. His small hand was carefully placed on her forehead. Yue Yao looked at him and then at his hand on her forehead. She licked her dry lips and finally revealed a little of her face. Jing Yang smiled at her and immediately said, I'm Jing Yang. You can call me Yang. Yang, Yue Yao was still a little shy. She was so afraid of strangers. Since she was young, other than Yun Shishir and Yu, it was difficult for others to hold her for a while. Yun Shishir was surprised that Jing Yang could touch her forehead. This child has been afraid of strangers since she was young. Yun Shishir explained, I thought she would cry when she woke up and saw Yang. So afraid of strangers? My Yang has never been afraid of strangers since he was young, but this child is very smart. He was almost kidnapped by human traffickers when he was young. Kidnapped? Chapter 4493. The nurse came to make ward rounds and found Jing Yang's room. Seeing that he was not around, she went next door, but she did not expect Jing Qi to bring Jing Yang to another room. Seeing Yun Shishir and Jing Qi sitting together, the nurse was a little surprised. Do you know each other? Yun Shishir and Jing Qi nodded tacitly. Yes, we know each other. Yang, come over and take the temperature. Have you taken your medicine? As Jing Yang was beautiful and polite, all the nurses on the entire floor liked him. His little mouth was sweet and especially likable. Jing Qi quickly stood up. Not yet. The nurse walked over and handed the sterilized thermometer to Jing Yang. Jing Yang obediently put it in his mouth and stared at the nurse with wide eyes. He asked incoherently, Have I recovered? The nurse tapped his head. You're almost recovered. Then, can I still stay here? His words undoubtedly amused the group of people. The nurse could not stop laughing. Yang, don't tell me you can't bear to part with us and refuse to leave. Jing Yang did not speak and only looked at the nurse eagerly. The nurse explained, when you recover, you can be discharged. You can't stay here anymore. The beds here are all prepared for patients. When Jing Qi heard this, she looked at the nurse. Has his fever gone down? It's almost stable. As long as he doesn't catch a cold and try not to be exposed to the cold wind at night, it won't happen again. When Jing Yang heard that he could not stay in the hospital after recovering, he could not help but feel extremely disappointed. The nurse also took Yue Yao's temperature and gave him an injection to reduce his fever, but his temperature had decreased a lot. Yue Yao's mother, why don't you take Yue Yao for a walk downstairs? While the sun is good in the afternoon, he can sweat a little and recover faster. Okay. Jing Qi suggested, I saw the nurse say that Yang is almost recovered. He can be discharged tomorrow. Why don't we go for a walk in the hospital's back garden? The hospital's back garden is specially manicured. When I took Yang down yesterday, the little guy couldn't walk when he saw the bubble machine. I didn't buy it yesterday and the little guy was angry with me. Today, I can buy one to compensate him. Yun Shishir also nodded. Mu Yazhe was not around, and Yu and Xiao Yichen would only arrive the next day. She had been taking care of Yue Yao the whole day. Yun Shishir carried Yue Yao and Jing Qi to the back garden. When Jing Yang saw the back garden, he was very excited.